celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 2004 World Series win with a pregame ceremony today. And even though temperatures will be in the low 60s today, if you are heading to the game, take my word for it, dress like you're going skiing. You'll thank me later. Elsewhere in sports, the Bruins host Carolina at the Garden, the Celtics are on the road in Milwaukee, and the Revolution also playing today at Club America. Sun giving way to clouds this afternoon, high 62 degrees. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Jones Day, an integrated partnership collaboratively providing legal services for more than a century. 42 offices, 5 continents, serving clients as one firm worldwide. Learn more at jonesday.com.
Jim Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library as we do every Tuesday and Wednesday and Friday. And Boylston Street is already abuzz with all the marathon preparations, putting up the police barriers, a lot of excitement down here. We are streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. And we are joined in a couple of minutes by the mayor. Hello, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Well, it's actually not a couple of minutes. I think that's the mayor right there, by the way, in the red dress. Okay. For the entire hour, we're joined here by Boston Mayor Michelle Wu for April's Ask the Mayor. If you have a question for the mayor, you can call her, text her at 877-301-8970. If you're here at the library and would like to ask a question, you can find one of our colleagues, Hannah or Ethan, is right there right now, and talk to the mayor. Wu, it's good to see you. How are you?
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Wu, for coming to town, or this is your town. Actually, you were already here.
Oh, my goodness.
For coming down to the Boston Public Library. So let's start with, where were you for the eclipse?
Oh, my goodness. I feel like a changed human being after that.
Tell.
So so just to give you a sense of how big a deal this was, when I was growing up, I was always the kid who got the perfect attendance certificates at home, no matter how sick I was. I was going to school. That was the mantra. And so to take the kids out of the school is a big deal for me. But this was, we looked on Reddit. We decided just to go for it. It's not going to be here for another 20 years. So we didn't have anywhere booked or anything like that. I had activities all yesterday anyways. The day before. So 5 a.m., we packed the kids into the car and drove up to Vermont.
My God.
Ended up in a gorgeous state park in Waterbury, Vermont, on top of a hill with all sorts of folks who had set up their chairs and blankets, and then even a school group came, and all of these young people were around. And I'll say, I will remember that forever. Just the experience of it, and you knew it was coming too. You know the exact time and the exact seconds that the change would happen, and yet I don't think I've been that blown away by an experience ever. Just the light disappearing, this thing appearing in the sky, being surrounded by people who are all either screaming or speechless or every reaction, and it just for a second reminds you of our connection to this wider universe that we never think of in all of our daily lives. And it was beautiful, and to be able to be there with the kids, and it was worth the hours of traffic coming back afterwards.
That was totality in where you were in Vermont, right?
Yeah, it was about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow, so it got very dark.
It's the eeriest feeling too, because you kind of know what dusk feels like. You know what it's like when the sun is going down, but to have it happen so fast, but also everywhere at once, just that it just felt like Twilight Zone for a second, and then it clicked, and then this corona appears, and you just see this perfect black circle and a little speck of purple on the edge of it. It was unbelievable.
And it got cold?
It got cold.
Yeah.
It got cold about 20 minutes before, and we all bundled up, and then as quickly as it happened, the sun just comes back all of a sudden.
We had 2 producers from the Nova film, The Great American Eclipse, yesterday. One of the many things we learned, since you never missed a day of class, but I knew this. Do you know that the surface of the sun is 10,000 degrees, the temperature of the corona is 2 million degrees. Isn't that amazing? And by the way, every single person with whom we've spoken, including Jamie, our lead producer, didn't I tell you, though, she was going to be with her kids?
Yeah.
I did tell you. But everybody who did the totality thing, whether in Vermont, Canada, had the exact same reaction you did. This is just unbelievable.
I just felt like I was removed from a sense of time, space, place, and you get a feeling of what it must have been like over all the different millennia of people witnessing natural phenomenon for the first time. Just that sense of shock of is this real? And the beauty of it, I just.
How about your kids? What are they, 8 and 10 or 9 and
6 and 9.
6 and 9.
Yeah.
Did they have that kind of reaction, or for them was it more?
Yeah, one of them was screaming because he was so excited. The other one was sitting on my lap with me and kind of tucked in, and he's much more sort of contemplative and seeing what happens. But for the two of them to think in the scale of years, they were just like, well, you're going to drive us to the next one in 20 years, right?
That's right. You might be driving slower by then.
You've now made it totally impossible to talk about your budget, by the way. I mean, how do you do that after? I'm serious.
About nickels and dimes.
That was really great. That is really, really great.
Yeah.
In any case, speaking of your budget and horrible transitions, at least for me, so my understanding is there's an 8% increase, and this is where I get a little foggy. Please correct me if I'm wrong. At the same time you file this budget, you are asking the legislature to approve a change in commercial tax rates, the goal of which is to raise them on commercials so you spare residential property owners from a dramatic increase in their property taxes. If the legislature is to say no to this, and I read that they said yes to Menino years ago, we don't know what they're going to do here, it seems to me you only have two choices, and this is where I hope you'll correct me. Either raise the burden dramatically on homeowners, on residential property owners, or make dramatic cuts in your budget. Is that a fair summary?
It's a little bit different than that. And first I will say, just in terms of the budget increase, because I know in the context of the state's budget situation and then our proactive seeking this legislative tool, it feels a little bit jarring to talk about 8% growth. It's a bit deceptive. A big chunk of that 8% is actually funding that is being transferred from what's currently called the BPDA to offset for the new planning department. So it's not new money, but because we created a new city department, and that used to be self-financed by the BPDA on their own books, not accountable to the city. Because we are moving it to the city, we're moving the staff as well as the funding that supports them. So about a quarter of that increase is just that revenue neutral move.
So 6% roughly.
So, which is about 5 to 6% is about in line with what it's been year over year.
Okay, and am I right about the consequences if the legislature fails to do what you want?
So here's the thing about the understanding our tax laws. They are very strict and very prescriptive. Each city has two types of ways they can assess, put a rate on how much taxes are paid, either residential or commercial. And you can't distinguish between different types of residential or different types of commercial. There's two buckets. And basically, Prop 2.5 means that cities can take a 2.5% increase in their total tax collection every single year to sustain the growth in how quickly health insurance cost goes up for city workers and all of that. So, but how it's applied is however much in taxes you took last year, it increases by 2.5%, and then it automatically gets proportioned between residential and commercial. So we actually don't have a choice to say, well, if commercial values are going down and therefore the revenue coming from commercial is going down, we're just going to have a hole in the budget. That's not how the default works. The default is automatically then that it gets proportioned onto residential taxpayers. So if we do nothing, and if there is a dramatic decrease in the valuations of commercial properties in the downtown area, then residents will see a significant increase, and that is what we are trying to avoid. And just to be clear, the framing is, all of this is so complicated, but basically we are in a 5-year cycle for property tax revaluations. This is the year that it happens. It's backwards looking, and so we are judging property values based on what happened in the last year, not judging about this economic moment or the year ahead. And if those values end up going down, for many of the buildings, the total amount of taxes they are paying are still going down with the reapportionment that we're trying to do legislatively. It just wouldn't go down by as much as it would have, so that residential rates don't fill in all of that decrease with their own increase.
And do you have any indication, I mean, unlike when you and we have discussions about needing approval on Beacon Hill, in most circumstances, like, for example, the issue of rent control, why did you have to go there? There's this constitutional provision that requires, if you're doing this tax thing, you go to them. The only legislator whom I've heard quoted is actually from Boston, Senator Collins, who seemed to be skeptical, to say the least. Do you have any indication that they're going to do what you want them to do?
I don't. We've started some early conversations, but here's the tricky part: is we don't have the specific numbers to show how much shift would be needed or if it's needed at all. What happened when Mayor Menino went up and did this in 2004 was that they were going through their revaluation cycle as well, which concludes in November, December of a calendar year. Tax bills go out in January. The legislative cycle ends in July. So basically, they had waited until the legislature was out of session. They finished their tax property revaluations, realized they had a problem, and then in January, people actually got 2 bills in the mail because they didn't know if this legislative item would pass or not. They had to wait until January when the legislature was back in session. And that meant that people had 2 bills, one that said, if it passes, you pay this. If it doesn't pass, you pay that. We don't want to be in that situation at all. To have the maximum stability and certainty, we need this tool proactively while we're still on this year's legislative cycle versus waiting until it's too late to know too late to tell people exactly what their bills would be in line with the tax cycle. What that means is that we are asking for this tool to be ready just in case. The difference between commercial values 2 years before and this last year was 1%. So we're not anticipating a dramatic catastrophe, but even small shifts can have an impact on the residential side because commercial properties end up making up so much of our tax base. So commercial properties paying a little bit less in taxes ends up being a lot more per resident in an increase. And so because the impacts are felt so differently, because we're in the middle of a housing crisis, in order to avoid the default of doing nothing and having residential taxes go up, exacerbating the burden on residents, we are getting this tool to have if we need it. We also have a provision in the legislation that if it's not needed, we wouldn't use it. And we would have a 3-year window to see if the retroactive impacts end up pushing us to need it. There is a chance we may not need it at all.
One last quick question, though. If they do say yes, and if you do need it, you're increasing a tax burden on a sector that's having a really difficult time in Boston to begin with, commercials. So aren't you worried that it exacerbates the crisis, the vacancy crisis, for example, that you're trying to deal with downtown?
So I understand the argument that any rate increase is a burden. The total amount of taxes would very likely still go down for these properties. And in the scheme of what we're trying to do in terms of downtown revitalization and office to residential conversions and finding ways to grow our tax base overall, this is a system that we have under the tax laws. If you ask me to choose between every single resident and homeowner having to have double-digit increases in their taxes or our commercial property owners who definitely are struggling, paying a little bit less of a decrease in taxes, I'm going to choose that every time. And we are trying to seek to support that sector and make sure that from the city side, we're doing everything to avoid longer-term impacts so they can recover as well.
I forgot to give the number, 877-301-8970. You can either call the mayor or text the mayor at 877-301-8970.
You know, one last thing, budget-wise, in this same story talking about the proposed budget in the Globe, it also talks about what the school committee has done. They've approved a slight budget. Well, I guess it's not slight, depending on how you call it, 1.45 billion to 1.5 billion for the upcoming school year. But they're also talking about eliminating hundreds of positions. What do you see for the schools?
Yeah, the school budget has gone up in terms of the operating budget and the city's contribution as part of our school funds on top of what the state specifically dedicates for each school district through state funding. Boston has been supplementing more and more of those state funds because they simply have not been sufficient for the scale of support that we want our students to have and that our our school communities deserve. However, the difference here is that the federal government had given a large pot of money as a one-time pandemic relief mechanism. Those dollars were always set to expire around this year and next year. And so the district has been phasing them out over the last several years and working with each school to make tough choices, because when you have all of a sudden a surplus of funds, every dollar was used well, and often these were positions that they knew would have to be temporary, but it's still difficult in the moment where it ends up phasing out. We have brought on many of those positions onto the regular school and city budget. And so Superintendent Skipper has done an incredible job of not just getting results with this funding and seeing the progress in the right direction for what we want to see with attendance rates and retention of our educators and school leaders and partnerships and support and all the great things that are happening in our school department. But we're making a transition, as every school district around the country is, off of this one-time federal spending. And I believe the district's done it in just about as responsible and supportive a way as we could.
So I think we have totally destroyed the mood of the eclipse. And our number is 877-301-8970. Andrew is at the mic at the Boston Public Library. Hey, Andrew, come on over to the mic. You don't have to say you're Andrew, because we know you are. Welcome to the show. You're talking to the mayor. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much, Mayor, for taking my question. My name is Andrew, and I'm a journalism and political science student at Northeastern University, and I work for our student-run news broadcast called NUTV, and we cover all the issues that face students in Boston and Massachusetts as a whole. So Boston is a massive hub for higher education. At the same time, the cost of living here continues to rise. It's currently at 50% higher than the national average, making it difficult for young individuals to afford to live here. My question for you is, what is your administration doing to create incentives, and specifically financial incentives, for college students to live and work in Boston following graduation? So we're growing the economy here.
Andrew, thank you. Before you answer that question, Ben on Twitter, as a variation of Andrew's question, what are your thoughts, Mayor, on the Globe article stating 1 in 4 young people are planning to leave Boston in the next 5 years? The other side of the same coin.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your question and for what you do in the school community and in our city. This has always been, in some ways, Boston's secret weapon, but also one of our challenges as well. More and more, the whole context of cities around the world is that you want to be the place where people want to live. When everyone has options, you can find out about every job opportunity. You can even zoom in to do your work from living in different places much more flexibly than ever before. And so everyone has the choices to go where they can afford to live and where they have fun and have community and want to be. And so we need to make sure that we are fulfilling all of the ways that people make decisions about their lives. First and foremost is housing. How do we continue to grow housing? We're using every possible tool, putting city land into getting developed into hundreds of thousands of units of new housing that had been in our portfolio for 3 decades, working to streamline and improve our processes so that new proposals, especially affordable housing proposals, can move through quicker than ever before. And also trying to find ways where we're actually leaning in and leading on concepts like social housing, where publicly subsidized housing allows for a whole range of income levels of people to stay and thrive in a community. When it comes particularly to college students deciding, and I count myself as one who wasn't expecting to live in this area when I came out here for college and fell in love with the community, got a job here afterwards, and also got to know the community throughout my years here. All of those pieces are important. Having the job opportunities, check, in terms of there's a lot going on here. A lot of the growth industries for the next generation are right here. But being able to then get to know the community throughout the summer so that we don't just have our universities as little bubbles that don't interact with the rest of the city. That's where events like Open Streets, where we shut down an entire street in a major street in a neighborhood and have public events, or have other festivals, or really intensive internship programs and fellowships. So there's an engagement throughout your time on campus, so you feel this is your community. A lot of the sports, arts, cultural, public events tend to be the drivers in kind of attracting and having people get to know and feel like they connect with this area, and then having the infrastructure afterwards. Particularly this generation, smarter than any other before, of understanding I'm choosing a place not just for fun right in this moment. We need to have more welcoming and inclusive nightlife economy and other opportunities. But is this a place where I could eventually raise a family if I want? Are childcare costs appropriate? Are housing costs affordable, not just to rent, but to buy a home? We have programs going on all those fronts. I would say the biggest factor, I always say, for whether people will want to be in our city and can come to the places they want to get to is public transportation. That is often the first impression that our college students have of the city and how well we're running, even though it is a state entity and even though there are different things happening in different pockets. So the more that we can work together to ensure that there's priority on fixing and improving public transit as well, I think the smoother experience for everyone. And I've been pushing for more affordability throughout all ways of accessing public transit. The system should be free. At some point in the future, we should start with buses right now, and we're moving forward on a discounted fare for residents who economically qualify for it. And so there will be all these ways in which the experience, the support, the financial barriers will keep coming down.
Andrew, thank you so much for your question. Our number is 877-301-8970. Before we go to the phones, Mayor, you mentioned you found a job here. One of the people for whom you worked is Senator Warren. I assume you read the story that she ventured her legal opinion about what Israel is doing in Gaza yesterday and said she thought it was, that legally it was genocide. She wouldn't say what her own position was on that issue. She did say she opposed more weaponry. What did you think about what Senator Warren had to say about Israel's behavior in Gaza?
I have said from the beginning, I have full faith in our federal delegation, our congresswoman, and our senators and those in Massachusetts to know the issue well, to study all the relevant factors, and to advocate for the values and the interests of community members here. And so I think just as a person who is watching all of this unfold, just like so many others, and someone who has a bit of a role in making sure that our communities on the ground feel safe here and understanding the connections that Bostonians have to all the conflicts, in every part of the world, but especially here, day by day, seeing the scale of devastation, seeing the number of children and civilians who are being impacted, it's horrific. And so I think from the beginning, the Boston area has been one that has called for peace, of a return of all the hostages, of a ceasefire, of aid to the residents on the ground who are suffering in this situation. And I trust our federal delegation to continue advocating and working with this administration and using the levers that they have.
Our number is 877-301-8970.
Amina in Cambridge, you are on with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Thanks for calling.
Welcome.
Hi, Jim and Margie. Thank you so much. Sure. I love your show, by the way.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for everything that you bring and giving actual enough time, I feel like, than a lot of other shows.
Thanks.
And what I wanted to ask, Mayor Wu, I wanted to ask a question about your schedule. So I am a single parent living in Cambridge. I only have one kid, and I'm barely able to be in all the places I am.
Not laughing at you, Amina. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in awe, and I'm also just, I want to hear from you, if you don't mind sharing, like, how do you manage that? Because I've been at events and conventions, and I see you show up, give an incredible speech, talk to people, meet people, and then I'll see you again later, and then it's like, I see you in the press conference, and then somehow you seem to be everywhere, but at the same time, you earlier talked about having a young family, 6 and 9, and I'm like, as a human being with a family, with a life, how do you manage your responsibilities and in your capacity as mayor to really be in so many places?
Best question of the day, Amina, without a doubt.
We all wonder that, even those of us whose kids are grown and gone. Okay, how do you do it, Mayor Wu?
And probably the one for which I have the worst answer, which is just every day sometimes it feels like I'm just trying to keep up. There's so, especially as a working mom, there's so many things on the list that end up just feeling like you have to either put it aside. It's just impossible to do everything that you want to do. And so there's this constant game. Sometimes it feels like the spinning plates up on the in like a magic act or something of, do I really need to do laundry today? Is there something I can shake out of the pile that is clean and just get one more day and then I can have a day here? Okay, I'm gonna open my phone and show you. Let me just count how many different colors there are in my calendar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. Okay, so there's 6 different colors of types of events that are the kinds of things that I have to keep track, which is what I'm doing every day, what the family's and the kids' schedule is, things that I can't go to, but if something got canceled, I could go to on the work side, things that are personal, just like, in the doctor's appointment or remember to do this or that doesn't fall in any other category, things that I should know about, and it's just... It's madness in terms of the schedule really determines everything. And I will be in a meeting in one place, and sometimes I can't remember if I had breakfast that day, where I was 3 meetings ago, because I just open my calendar and go to the next thing. And I have full control with my team of what we put on that calendar, anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months in advance. But once the day arrives, in some ways it's just kind of everything is set, and it feels like there's very little flexibility. And that's when being a mom and you have to come, so-and-so, one of the kids threw up at school, or that, it's just the most humbling of balance, because you remember that nothing can ever be 100% within your control. You do your best, you try your best. One thing that we've started recently with the family, especially as the kids are a little bit older and have all their own activities now, instead of just coming with me to events, we have this weekly worksheet that my husband and I go through, where each day has a column, and then there's little boxes that are what time I'm getting home, what time the kids get home, therefore what the dinner plan is of, am I going to pick something up on the way back from my last event? Do we do the ingredients on Sunday night and then throw it together, or do we kind of really have time to cook or do something else? What is it that we are going to eat that day, ideally planned out on the Sundays, and then what is the goal for that day? And that can be do the laundry. I try to keep it very low-key, or pull out all the tax documents so that they're in one place, so that the goal 3 days later is actually finish the taxes, right? And having that, I found that at least it doesn't always go according to that, but it just limits the amount of decisions on the fly that you have to make of, okay, now, oh no, it's dinner time. Should I go out and get something? At least you have thought about it before, and then it just makes it easier to just kind of do it.
Amina, you feel better?
A little bit, but you still have to mention sleep. So,
Didn't mention sleep.
Yeah.
That's a different color on the coating, by the way. Amina, that was an excellent question. Really glad you asked it.
Amina said you're a
Thanks.
single mom, right, Amina?
Yeah, single mom, one kid.
You have got
My
the
husband
first man.
is amazing.
And I think that you cannot...
My sisters are in the area. We live in a 2-family home with my mom, and so there's all sorts of... I'm so blessed to have lots and lots of helping hands and still lots of plates, but multiple people.
Let me just tell you, I'm totally exhausted listening to that schedule. I must admit, totally exhausted, but totally impressed. You have to be very organized. I think that's...
Just like you were when you were a mother of young children, Marjorie. Mayor, we got to take a break. Before we do, can we discuss something else? That you mentioned the word community a couple times to answer your first question. We see the marathon infrastructure going up. One Boston Day is around the corner. Could you fill us in on what's happening this year?
Yeah, the Boston Marathon is our biggest event of the year. We welcome visitors from all around the world to celebrate this human spirit and resilience and everything that this incredible sport represents. We also celebrate the fastest Bostonians, so that was a new award that will continue this year. But as many folks in our community know and always will remember, in 2013, an act of terrorism took several lives and left scars on so many others. And so One Boston Day is always on April 15th, remembering the lives that were lost, the loved ones, the survivors, the community that came together around that, the first responders and healthcare workers. And so there are various events, formal events, such as quietly laying a wreath with the specific community and those impacted by the lives who were lost and all those who were impacted. And then in terms of the entire community, we encourage everyone to do acts of kindness or service. There are some public events you can get involved in, cleanups in parks, or volunteering in different locations, or just take a moment to smile, have a conversation with someone on the T with you that day, buy a cup of coffee for someone who's standing in line next to you. It's a reminder of how Boston came together, and that is ultimately who we are.
Are you still doing the tea thing with
Yes.
You are? How's that going?
It's great.
Just explain. I didn't explain. You ride the
yes.
tea. Go ahead. I'm sorry. And then we'll take a break.
I have, there's a series called Commute With Me where different residents can invite me to commute with them. And so I will document, I just kind of bring my phone and video different clips of our journey. I've been on just about every line now, a lot of different bus lines. And it's a chance to talk about what they do, who they are in the city, as well as how much public transportation can be a stressor or a vehicle to be able to put together all the pieces of what you love in your life.
Where do we find those if people want to see
Those are on our social media,
They
so
are.
you can find it on TikTok or on Instagram.
And by the way, speaking of the tea, I should have mentioned Phil Lang, the general manager of the tea, is with us for an hour on Friday to take your questions and ours, 11 to 12. Phil Lang will join us at the library.
Okay, the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu, is going to be with us till the top of the hour. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. If you want to call or text, the number is 877-301-8970, or you can come down here to the Boston Public Library, where we are broadcasting live. We're also streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be right back.
I'll be running with them. I'll be running with my people.
Running for sport is not really a thing in Haitian culture. If you're running, logic says there must be a reason. For elite Haitian runners participating in this year's Boston Marathon, the dream is to one day need no reason.
That I'm always kind of at the back of my mind, hoping that the day will come that I don't have to run to raise funds or awareness about grave situation in Haiti.
I'm Esteban Bustillos. This story tomorrow on GBH's Morning Edition.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Johnson & Wales University. From faculty mentors to research and internships, JWU helps students explore their passions through an immersive approach to education. You can discover more at jwu.edu. And Upstart Logic, founded in Silicon Valley in 1998. Committed to helping CEOs and their teams diagnose and solve intricate problems, cultivate leadership, and develop company culture. Learn more at upstartlogic.com. And Q Legal, providing legal marketing solutions for law firms in Boston and beyond. Marketing strategies include websites, social media, video, and search. You can learn more about their services at qlegal.com. And Babson College. Students can gain the know-how to become a successful leader at the #1 graduate school in entrepreneurship, ranked by U.S. News and World Report. Virtual open house April 17th. babson.edu/grad open house.
I'm Marco Werman reporting from Israel's northern border with Lebanon, where a simmering war with Hezbollah has caused thousands of people to evacuate, with mixed emotions and no idea when they can go home.
I'm not feeling angry. I'm feeling concerned about the future of my kids.
In limbo on the Israeli-Lebanese border, it's on the world.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Mayor Wu is with us for the remainder of the hour. You can speak with her or text her at 877-301-8970. And Ethan, our colleague, is over there if you would like to have him considering putting your question in queue for the mayor directly. Before we continue, you brought something marathon related for us?
Yes, this is for you from the Boston Athletic Association. Just a little 2024 marathon hat.
Love that.
Bank of America is the sponsor for the first time this year. So all new logos and things.
Thank you.
Lovely, lovely. That's a great hat. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So we've asked you about this before, but it seems to be continuing as a source of debate around the city is White Stadium. That's the stadium out in Franklin Park that is proposed to have this, soccer team there, but they're still upset about what's going to happen to Boston Public Schools and their football seasons teams. There was a whole new piece written by two gentlemen who I guess played football back in Boston. Where do they say? In the 60s. Michael Thomas and Daniel Aramean, who graduated from English High School in '66. That's Aramean, and they're from the English High School Association. Anyway, they're complaining about the loss of the stadium for the high school. So where are we now?
Can I read their question, which I think summarizes the whole thing?
Sure.
They say near the end, couldn't some accommodation be reached with the women's professional soccer team to allow the football teams, meaning the high school teams, to use the stadium for the rest of the regular season rather than just post-November or whatever?
So I think it's really important to make sure we're clear about what the situation is with football and with other sports in terms of the scheduling right now, because there are some misconceptions. And frankly, I do think as a whole, we are, for one reason or another, because of the decline in the stadium and lack of investment and the sort of shape of the youth sports program overall, we are in a different place where the demand for the stadium right now is very different than it might have been several decades ago. We have 7 varsity football teams across the entire school district. 2 of them use White Stadium in some way. The others don't at all. The 2 that use it, Boston Latin School and Boston Latin Academy, they have their practices elsewhere. So neither of the teams use it for their day-to-day drills or practices or anything like that. One of the teams, I think BLA, uses the Playstead, which would still be available. That's the park area outside the stadium, but immediately adjacent. And so they change in the stadium using the locker rooms, and then they go out and practice. And that could still continue, that arrangement. These 2 teams use the stadium as their home field, which means they each play 5 games there, and that's the extent of football that happens in the stadium right now. We are helping one of the teams renovate their current practice field with a scoreboard and with everything, so that they will be set up actually closer to where the school is and with the facilities that they have to be able to play their games there as well. And then the other team, we're actually renovating an entirely different field and creating a whole new space for football with all of the scoreboard and equipment and all of that. So there will be new and additional football facilities. There's a limit because we're keeping it as grass instead of artificial turf. There's some limitation on how much wear and tear that the field can take from different types of sports in one season. There's also concerns about the lines and this and that. So the number of hours that Boston Public School students will be able to use White Stadium is just going to be exponentially more. It will more than triple. The number of hours that football will use the stadium may actually end up being the same or even more than it is right now, because we will have the capacity to host home end-of-season games for all of the teams in the district, not just for the home games for the 2 of them here. They will have places where they get to play during the season, just as their other teams play in other fields during the season, and then White Stadium really will be everyone's kind of marquee championship showcase stadium for those games. And we believe the impact of having a stadium with functional plumbing and locker rooms and the seating that can create an experience that will be worth more than trying to just tie together some of the loose threads. And
are you meeting with the litigants? Forget the football thing for a second. Are you meeting with the litigants? I know they got an injunction was denied. Their injunction request was denied. Is the city meeting with them to try to resolve the differences over parking and other issues they have, or is that?
So the litigants have not expressed a specific concern about the types of issues that are related to the design or parking, transportation. They are just, the lawsuit was about whether the city has the legal authority to even consider a project like this.
Because they're private, yeah.
Yep. The court decision was very clear that not only was the judge not giving them the immediate emergency injunction or stop to the proposal right now, but they even went pretty far in taking every one of their claims within the decision and saying this will not have a likelihood of success in the larger case. So the legal teams I leave it to them to figure out. if and when they're going to drop their lawsuit and all of that. But we are proceeding with traffic, parking, design with community members and with the Franklin Park
Can we stay on high school for a second? The good news and a bad news story. The good news story, I think it's wonderful. I didn't know about it until yesterday.
State champions.
This parade for state champions. You can tell us about that. But at the same time, please also address this painful study, and I'm sure it's painful for you too, about how many high schoolers feel sad, feel hopeless, and what the city is trying to do to address those kinds of things.
Yeah, it really is one in the same conversation of, especially over the last few years in the pandemic, the sense of isolation. But I would argue that even pre-pandemic, as social media has become more and more of the adolescent experience, that leaves some. There's less and less in-person interaction and larger community building, and that has real impacts on mental health and well-being, particularly for young people and their families. And so we continue to see that we need ways for young people to not just come to school ready to learn, but to feel excited to be at school because it is their community, it is their home, it is with loved ones among their classmates and mentors and other educators and adult figures at school. And that can't just be about academics. Certainly, we want every single career track to be available. We're putting early college and vocational education in. We are creating direct pipelines into jobs like with the EMK Health Careers Institute, Health Careers High School, and Mass General Brigham, and partnerships on climate tech and in many, many areas. But sports, arts, fun, and a sense of belonging goes a long, long way. And that's why youth sports is so important. That's why having performance and public art and opportunities for our young people to be creatively engaged is so important. And so we have a policy in our administration. You bring home a championship, you get a parade. And so that meant that last year, at the end of the year, we celebrated the city's first ever Pop Warner National Championship with our very young people, a boys team and a cheer squad, a girls cheer squad that had brought home the national championship from Florida. And then in this winter season, 5 Boston schools won state championships. And so it was, okay, let me see if I could get all of them. The Cathedral Panthers, the girls basketball team, New Mission Titans boys basketball team, Charlestown Townies boys basketball team, Boston Latin School Wolfpack boys hockey team.
Very good.
And then 2 individual wrestlers from the Josiah Quincy School, women's wrestling. They all won state championships, and so we had a joint parade. They all got to know each other. We had a big press scrum and pizza party in City Hall, and really showed off their talent, their determination, and also the larger community's love for our young people and seeing the potential that they represent.
It's great. Julie in the car, you're on with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. Welcome, Julie.
Hi. Yeah, I live in Navy Yard, and I just moved out of a big building there called Harbor at the.
Hey, Julie, we're going to put you on hold. I hate to do this to you. It's a horrible connection.
Yeah.
We'll try to get back to you in a second if you're in a different location.
You got a piece of Charlestown Navy Yard?
We'll try her again in a second. Kate in Georgetown, you're on with the mayor.
Hi, Mayor Wu. I am normally from California, and with the earthquake and with all these things coming up, I'm wondering what you're doing to work across New England states with fire. California coordinates with the whole state, and police, and also schools. It seems like there's more collective and less individual, which is more costly. So I'm wondering what you're doing as far as fire and all of those kind of things.
Thank you, Kate.
Coordinating.
Yeah, thank you so much. Our Office of Emergency Management in Boston serves as the hub of a regional system where all of the law enforcement agencies and public safety first responders are plugged into one source of information and coordination. There was a little bit, it was in the news earlier in the calendar year around a regional grant that comes from the state and that the City Council did ultimately advance in order to make sure that we have the resources to fund that. The Boston Marathon is actually a good example of how that works in the day-to-day. This is one of the, there's a classification system for different types of public events in the country, and their what is the assessed risk level or threat level, and big events like the Super Bowl, because there are so many people coming in from all over, it's high profile, there's a lot of attention on it, that is in the highest category. The Boston Marathon is also in that category in terms of our local event that qualifies. And so that means we have federal public safety and first responder agencies that come in and coordinate, statewide, regional, and every community along the marathon route as well. There's a series of briefings that set up a structure. We will have some even later in this week and in the coming days to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And then there's oftentimes a regional command center that is set up as well, just to monitor everything in real time and ensure that each agency has a representative there all in one place and all together. Those are the kind of one-off events that we know are happening that we want to be prepared for. In terms of preparing for the unexpected or the unscheduled events that, knock on wood, hopefully will not happen, but that we also need to be prepared for. The Office of Emergency Management is also coordinating. We have put forward some proposals to the federal government around resilience and preparing for flooding across the region, and there are other areas where we've identified the need for Boston to really step up and coordinate with our surrounding municipalities.
Thank you much for the question.
Julie's going to give it another shot.
Okay, great.
Julie's in the car. Thank you for being patient, Julie.
Try
again.
Hi, yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just moved out of an apartment building called Harborview at the Navy Yard in town because of a huge rent increase. And I was trying to find out if there is any kind of a law that requires the landlord to give the tenant ample time to decide whether or not they want to take a big increase or find a new place to live, because we were required, we're paying $4,000 a month for a tiny one-bedroom in that building. And we were required to give them 60 days notice to move out. They gave us 7 days when they told us about a 10% rate increase. So $4,400 a month they now want, to decide if we wanted to accept that or give our notice, which just seems patently unfair. I just cannot believe there's not a law that protects tenants from this. And I went to mass.gov. I contacted the Housing Authority. I went to the tool on the mass.gov website, which is great, called Ask a Legal Librarian, to find out if Massachusetts has a law to require tenants to be given ample notice about these big rate increases on their rent.
Yeah, Julie, let's hear what the mayor has to say. I think she understands the issue. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry and hope that you are still in Boston somewhere. We know that our housing crisis is affecting every neighborhood and everyone along all parts of the income spectrum and all professions and industries. In this case, it sounds like it's very much determined by the lease and the terms that were originally signed there, but we have put up a home rule petition. The idea of stabilizing rents is to give people the time is to manage their lives. It's not to say we're going to change market conditions and take away the ability for an industry, in this case, property landlords, to function, but spacing it out a little bit is make or break for families and for residents to be able to handle all the other things that have to go into their lives. And so this actually would be covered by our provision, it sounds like, where we would have a cap on the rate of increase just to give that sense of predictability. One provision that is related but doesn't apply here, we have a condo conversion law in Boston where if a landlord or a property owner is purchasing a building to basically remove all the tenants and convert it into condo ownership, because this was a trend that the city was experiencing starting from a little over a decade ago. There are provisions there for how much time each tenant has to have, and in some cases even compensation for them to address their needs, particularly if it is a household with a tenant with a disability or seniors, but that applies in the relatively narrow space of condo conversions. And we've been asking for the rent stabilization law to be considered in the same vein. There's already a template that exists that helps people ease the sudden shock of a dramatic increase in their costs. In some ways, the tax shift classification proposal is the same idea as well. We are not asking to take away anyone's ability to function in an industry, but just to ease a transition and cushion a shock so that it doesn't end up uprooting people from their daily lives and our kids from our schools and everything else that is really important to the stability of our community.
We wish you a lot of luck, Julie. A couple of quick things. We're running out of time. Correct me if I'm wrong. ARPA, American Rescue Plan money, federal money, I think is used for one of the things we just talked about, this mental health thing.
Absolutely.
I think it's also used, for your, I think it's called SPACE program, the effort to get the storefronts that have been abandoned, and you're nodding in agreement. That money's all disappearing. I mean, so what does a mayor do when so many, I assume people would agree, important projects are funded by federal funds that are not to reappear?
So we tried to use our ARPA dollar to have lasting impact, knowing that they would be one-time funds. So in some cases, it's helped us build infrastructure. With the space grants, for example, there's now a whole process and mechanism where the city has the expertise in-house to be able to know how best to support businesses and what they've needed, and we can, with the funding that we can find, continue on in some of those pathways. There's also been a proof of concept where now we have been and will continue to partner with philanthropy or other sources of funding, whether it's state or federal funding or just generosity within Boston or companies that want to get involved with the partnership. This is a proven program now that works, and we have that in multiple of our key areas, whether it is mental health and behavioral health, small business creation, housing creation, climate. There are ready-made programs that we could turn back on in a second with the right partnerships.
Yeah, speaking of federal, though, last thing from me is I assume you saw the Wall Street Journal polls that showed Joe Biden. You were campaigning for him in New Hampshire. We know you're a big supporter. Joe Biden trailing in 6 of the key swing states. I think the only one where he's not trailing Donald Trump is in Wisconsin. How concerned are you about what happens in November?
I'm very concerned. We've been down this pathway before. We have been through this exact matchup before, and so we know how ugly it will get. We've also been down a path where this particular candidate shows what they're capable of. And I think they're being very clear, tapping into an anger that people feel at a lot of stressors in their lives not being addressed by government effectively or trying to fix challenges that have actually been the result of decades of lack of funding or engagement. And I will say, in any space, it has been completely transformative to have the partnership from the Biden administration, not only with how they handled working with with Congress and with our delegation, for example, on finding funding that is now there for new infrastructure, for climate resiliency, for job creation and housing creation, but it's a team approach where we talk to someone from the White House every single week on some program that we are launching or working on. And when you have a team there that is aligned with trying to support cities and solving root problems, listening to the people who know best in our communities, it's night and day from having to arm up again and get ready to fight your own federal government in order to protect your residents.
Mayor Wu, good to see you.
Very, very much for coming.
Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is continuing to make her case for the ouster of House Speaker Mike Johnson. NPR's Claudia Grisales reports Greene could face pushback from other Republicans in calling for Johnson's removal.
Congresswoman Greene wrote to members of the Republican conference to say she believes Speaker Johnson has breached his duty to the party. Greene has taken initial steps for a so-called motion to vacate, but has yet to force a vote on the plan. Such a vote is allowed under conference rules. Many Republicans in the House have pushed against another ouster following the forced removal of Johnson's predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, last year. They warn a Johnson ouster could allow Democrats an opportunity to take the speakership in a tightly controlled Republican House. Claudia Salas, NPR News.
Palestinians who've been returning to the city of Han Yunis in Gaza say there's widespread class action lawsuit in the aftermath of last year's train derailment in eastern Ohio. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the accident resulted in the spill of hazardous chemicals in the region.
Norfolk Southern's agreed to pay $600 million to settle claims from people living within 20 miles of where the train left the track in East Palestine, Ohio. The railroad has already paid more than $1 billion towards the cleanup and promised to set up a fund for residents' long-term health care needs. Tesla's also settled a lawsuit brought by the family of a man who was killed when his car crashed into a highway barrier. The man was using Tesla's autopilot feature. Terms of that settlement were not disclosed. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
More than 200 chemical plants in the United States will be required to abide by new rules issued by the EPA. The facilities are being ordered to reduce toxic emissions that are likely to cause cancer. The new directive applies to a number of plants, including facilities in Texas and Louisiana. This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Red Sox host the Baltimore Orioles this afternoon at Fenway Park for the team's home opener. It's also an exciting day for fans, with the team celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 2004 World Series win, the win that broke the curse. Cesar Crespo was one of the members of the 2004 team, being honored today with a pregame ceremony.
It's a great opportunity to show my kids all the experience that I had here and the good times. So it's been a blessing.
Tributes are also planned for Tim Wakefield and Larry Lucchino, who were both part of the 2004 team and recently passed away. First pitch is at 2:10 today with Brian Bayo on the mound, so look for the K-Men above the Green Monster. And now that the solar eclipse is well behind us, the folks at the Blue Hills Weather Observatory in Milton have released information it gathered before, during, and after the eclipse. And while visibility, wind speed, and humidity levels all showed minor changes, the temperature difference was the most noticeable. At the beginning of the eclipse at 2:16 p.m. yesterday, the temperature at the Weather Observatory was 66 degrees Fahrenheit. By 3 p.m., the temperature dropped to 63 degrees, and about 20 minutes later, the temperature was 58 degrees, an 8-degree difference from the start of the eclipse. But if you had seen Marjorie Egan all bundled up on the roof of GBH yesterday, you would have thought she was headed up Mount Everest. In the forecast, sun giving way to clouds this afternoon, high 62 degrees. It is 62 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
It's Jim Brownie. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Libraries. We do it every Tuesday and now Wednesdays and Fridays. And we're streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. But we're not going to be here next Tuesday. I think that has to do with the marathon or something, doesn't it, Jim?
It is have to do with the marathon.
Yeah, okay. We're not going to be here next Tuesday. Sorry
but we will
that.
be here Friday. And
Yes, we
Friday, the general manager of the T, Philip Eng, is kind enough to join us for an hour to answer your questions about the T and ours as well. And by the way, the Attorney General will join us here on Wednesday the 17th, which I think is next Wednesday, from 1 to 2. We're joined now by a local woman, Sue O'Connell. How long can we beat that one, do you think?
Well, I'm still getting, people still see me and yell, local
woman?
So
Exactly.
I think
we're not going to explain it. Google it and you'll figure it out yourself. She's co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News, co-host of NBC 10's Boston at Issue, which airs every Sunday at 11:30 following Meet the Press. Hello, Sue O'Connell.
Good day to you. Good
And
day
to you,
Oh,
of
I'm
course.
sorry. I just looked at my calendar like Michelle Wu's calendar, the mayor. I'm not supposed to be here right now. The color coding for here is purple.
Is that so, Michelle Wu, by the way?
It is the epitome. We try. I don't have a small child or small children. I do have multiple jobs, though. We try to
And you have a child.
Yeah,
Just
I
not
have
a little child.
But we just try to have that meeting she talked about once a week. Just like, what are we going to eat this week? And we never make it. We never accomplish
pretty
it.
impressive.
And that's why she's the mayor.
That's why she's the mayor.
That's why she's the
I'm
mayor.
with you, Sue, whirling dirt skirmish, a disorganization, a chaos.
Yep.
But anyway, here we are. We did make it to the Boston Public Library today. I just made it actually, but here I am. So I'm going to play a little bit of sound. We asked Mayor Wu about this, but we're going to ask you too. Senator Elizabeth Warren was asked last week at the Islamic Center of Boston, yes or no on whether Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Here's part of what she had to say, captured by our colleague, GBH News reporter Tori Bedford.
If you want to do it as an application of law, I believe they will find that it is genocide, and they have ample evidence to do so.
What do you think of what she had to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been talking a lot about this. I've been talking to a lot of regular people about this. You know, the challenge here is when you have an ally and a friend and an important part of your world, as America and Israel are, and things are happening that are beyond the pale. How do you react to it? I think Elizabeth Warren is threading a needle there a bit. She's not saying she thinks it's genocide. She's saying by the legal definition of it, she believes that's where where they're going to end up. Of course, the UN, I keep hearing, is considering leveling this charge. And then I think we're just going to be in this whole new world where countries like the United States, if this action gets deemed genocide, the United States, Germany, and other countries supplying weapons to a nation who has been deemed by the UN doing this. So it's the tipping point has happened here with the Israel-Hamas war, and we have to figure out where we are in it.
Well, you know, a couple things. As you said, so we're clear, Elizabeth Warren, who's one of the smartest lawyers on the planet, whether you like her policies or not, was saying that wasn't her opinion. That's what she believes. Again, the opinion. But she does believe that under the current circumstances, if Israel doesn't agree to some limitations on their behavior in Gaza, that weapons transfers from the United States should be stopped. That's a pretty dramatic. It's a pretty dramatic move by a United States senator, like Bernie Sanders, like Ed Markey, who was with us last week. And, you know, we had two family members of a hostage that was released after 54 days with us last week, and a hostage that is still being held. And, you know, I just want to be clear, because a lot of people get upset with us about about our criticism of how Netanyahu is handling the situation in Gaza, which is in a deadly fashion, we do have to mention that there are 100+ hostages still being held, as far as we can tell, not being treated terribly well. And that's got to be as high a priority as protecting the lives of innocent people, including kids, Palestinians in Gaza.
Absolutely. And also, you know, many of the weapons that have been sent, including recently, have been part of what we've already done. Like, this is not new decisions that have been made. So this is sort of just how government has been working, and that's what happened.
But nevertheless, I mean, most of us aren't privy to what the deals of years ago are. They're privy to what we do today. And by the way, the Biden administration didn't announce this. It was done very quietly, because they realized there are a lot of people in this country who are upset about supplying weapons with no conditions. So on the bright side, I have to say,
oh my gosh,
I am embarrassed, and I admit it. I didn't even know who Dawn Staley was until a week ago. And then I found out that Dawn Staley was the coach of the undefeated South Carolina women's basketball team, which went on to be the undefeated national champions. And then only after I heard this back and forth with a reporter at a press conference before the championship game did I find out everything else about her. Here is Dawn Staley being asked by a reporter about what she thinks whether trans athletes should be allowed to play. And again, this is right before the championship game against Iowa.
I'm under the opinion of, if you're a woman, you should play. If you consider yourself a woman and you want to play sports or vice versa, you should be able to play.
Do you think transgender women should be able to participate
that's your question you want
basketball?
Me to ask. I mean, you want to ask, so I'll give you that. Yes. So now the barnstorm of people are going to flood my timeline and be a distraction to me on one of the biggest days of our game. and I'm okay with that.
I thought after she said it'll be a distraction, she was going to say, see, I shouldn't have asked the question. By the way, before we get into debate, because we've had this discussion with you 10,000 times, the issue for me is not just her position. The fact that a leader like this, the day before a game, doesn't say, this is not the time or place for this kind of question. She takes a sip of coffee, and then she just directly looks at the reporter, and then not only does that, but then reaffirms that this is where I am, and I'm okay with it. I mean, the courage of this woman, even if you disagree with her on the merits, is amazing.
Well, I'll add another level to the gonads that she needed in order to do this. She's a woman of color, right? And she has taken, in answering that question, she's taken a position that if she had lost, if their team had not won, you can imagine the right-wing trolls calling it the DEI failure. That, you know, this is what happens when you get woke, you lose championships. And she knew that, right? This is not, she absolutely knew when she was answering that question. I think, you know, like a smart person, I think she probably prepared for it. She thought about what she was going to say. And like to your point, Jim, she called out to make sure that she was answering the question that was asked. And I just think it's a remarkable show of confidence in your team, confidence in your strength, confidence that you were going to win, and in your opinion. And again, I continue to say, as we said here, the conversations about trans people in sports should be centered around the people who it's impacting, trans people, women, coaches. So she's an example of that.
You know, let me just say one. The woman I assume most people know, this competitive swimmer, Riley Gaines, who is an anti-trans activist. And again, by the way, we can have the debate another day, as we have had many times, as whether or not Staley's position is the right one or the wrong one. But she had the courage to just say it. And Riley Gaines starts tweeting about her, saying how thoroughly incompetent she is. And when I saw the incompetent, I looked her up, and I didn't know this either. She wins Olympic gold medals. She's in the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, 10 gold medals as an athlete, including 3 Olympic medals.
Basketball Hall of Fame as a player. Basketball Hall of Fame as a coach. And then my favorite moment when I'm checking her out after I hear this thing, if you haven't seen this, you got to watch it. They're at practice the day before the championship game. And, you know, I guess at these practices, these shoot-around things, there's a lot of loud music kind of thing. There's music, and what's it called? The mascot. The Gamecock, whatever a Gamecock is, that is the South Carolina mascot, is dancing at center court. Dawn Staley, the coach, before her big game, walks out to the mascot and starts dancing with her at midcourt on this. This woman is just a treasure. She is absolutely amazing.
You know what was incredible, too, watching these women this week, is that they are just incredible athletes.
Well, I mean, this is the benefits of Title IX. I mean, this is the part that we have to, you know, we're so thrilled about the ratings, and we're thrilled about the level of athleticism. But, you know, I don't know about you, Marjorie.
And the passing and the three-point
I never
shooting.
got a new uniform when I played basketball in 1977, right? I never got...
We wore our gym uniforms.
You know, we got the bus that was left over. The focus on women's and girls' sports was almost zero, right?
You know those little blue things you just snap up the front?
Yeah, the little...
That was the royal blue, like the color of this pen. That's what we wore to gym class. And they were dirty and smelly.
What position did you play?
And I tell you what, the showers... You know what position I played?
I'm asking you.
The position that never got across center court. That's why.
Well, you should explain this. In the old days, in women's basketball, was it the backcourt could not cross the midcourt line?
That was before my time.
Right, exactly.
That was really bad. But not only that, but the showers didn't work, and we wore the same uniform for volleyball and basketball.
And the coaching was terrible. You know, much of the coaching was not great, right? And you didn't get recognized. I didn't have it. I'm not talking about myself. I had no talent, so it's not like I'm like, oh, gee, if I'd only been coached. But we didn't get the individual attention that the boys did. You know, I played softball for years. I was 28. And I was up at bat, and I was playing in a rec league, and a guy walked over, and I was standing there. He goes, can I give you a tip? I said, sure. And he moved my foot back. And then I was like hitting like crazy. I went, if anyone had told me that when I was 15, I would have had a full scholarship
But the problem with your conversation, you're acting that it was only like this when you guys were back in high school in your 20s. Continued on until 2 or 3 years ago. We talked the other day with Trenny about the weight room, in quotes, which was like 3 barbells at the women's thing.
No, it's not over. It's not over.
And but Charlie Baker, what did Charlie Baker say? Charlie Baker made a pronouncement after the women's final. There was a good one, and I'm embarrassed to say we didn't check it out. We will ask one of our colleagues to check it out in a minute. But he was talking about some equality thing that does not exist in terms of the women's finals and the men's finals. So we'll check out Baker, who happens to be head of the NCAA.
They look just as fast, just as powerful, just as impressive. I mean, it's unbelievable. And,
Right.
and these women are like 6'7" and 6'4". I mean, it's
No,
just,
but a lot of them aren't. Caitlin Clark is 6 feet tall.
that's right.
She's
But there
not
was a woman on the South Carolina team
Yeah,
that
well,
was
I mean, what's that-
6'7", and
yeah,
she was
Well,
unbelievable.
height does not mean talent, as I say, pointing to Jim on the back.
Thank you very much. And there's Maura Healy, who's 5'4".
Now that, if
who
I
is
had
a
known,
pro.
I'm still mad about that too. If I'd known I could have played pro at 5'4", I would have been all over it. If I had talent.
So what's going on with Melania and Log Cabin Republicans?
Boy. So
I mean, she's on the right side, but they are.
And explain who Log Cabin
So
Republicans
the Log
are.
Cabin Republicans are the poor LGBTQ people who are Republicans. And they have been around for decades. They, of course, are called Log Cabin after Abraham Lincoln, like, you know, the closest progressive Republican they could find to name themselves after in history. And, you know, they have a storied history of being big sometimes and having like the Mary Cheney, Dick Cheney's lesbian daughter. There's been a number of openly gay lawmakers who are Republicans, and they'd be in it. And then they shrink down when suddenly there's a president or someone who is completely oppressive like Donald Trump.
Did they endorse Trump?
They did endorse Trump. So they are sort of in...
Because he's so good on LGBTQ
well,
issues.
it's his thing. My thing, he
as
has
he
his
said
thing,
to you.
as he
Well,
said to me.
you have to repeat that. When you were interviewing Trump during the primary in 2016 in New Hampshire, what did he say to you?
Yeah, I asked him if we could count on him for progress for LGBTQ people, and he said, yes, you can. You have your thing. I have my thing. I don't know what his thing ended up being. But anyway, so Melania Trump is headlining again another fundraiser for the Log Cabin Republicans at Mar-a-Lago. It's not for the Trump campaign. My favorite thing about this, there's a secret about Melania Trump that we'd like to tell you. That
What is the
secretly, especially some of my dear gay men, my gay male friends, they really want to like her. Right? They really, really want to like her. Yes, because the blood red Christmas decorations that she did at the White House, there was some real edge to it, right? And if she had been a progressive Democrat, they would have been celebrating the difference of how she's celebrating Christmas. And remember being caught live on tape saying how much she hated Christmas and using the F word about having to decorate for Christmas. Another thing you can celebrate about her. So, obviously, she's got a great relationship with the Log Cabin Republicans, and they're having this wonderful fundraiser on the 20th, I think, if you want to go down and see it. I think it's only like, $5,000. But Trump did headline a Log Cabin event 2022. Now, the seriousness of this is that this is what gives them cover, too. So when someone is going to ask Donald Trump about his record on LGBTQ things, he's going to say, the Log Cabin Republicans love us. They love me and Melania. And that's the kind of cover that the Log Cabin Republicans are giving them. So,
by the way, we got an answer to our system. Thank you to question. Thank you to one of our colleagues from the AP. Under the current system, I have no idea what this means, but I'll read it to you. Men's teams that make the tournament, Final Four, or I guess the tournament as well, are rewarded with financial performance dollars known as units. It's been estimated that teams in this year's men's field can make millions, the value increasing the deeper they go in the tournament. While nothing has been approved yet, Charlie Baker, he used to be the governor, if you don't recall, said on Sunday the finance committee, I guess, of the NCAA is targeting next season to give women's teams the same financial compensation.
Bonuses,
I guess.
paid to actually win.
Good for Baker. Can we discuss what I think is a wonderful story for a second? This prom dress, whatever thing, with 1,200 young women, girls. Well, here's a little sound. Here's a snippet from a recent, NBC 10 Boston. That's where you work.
Yes,
it's incredible. Reporting on free prom dresses and other things given away at the Heinz. This is on Saturday.
I'm just really happy to be here. I never expected my prom day to look like this, but oh my gosh.
Dreams came true for 1,800 students at the 20th annual Belle of the Ball at the Heinz Convention Center in Boston on Saturday. Girls who otherwise may not have been able to afford a prom dress got to come here and pick one out.
Didn't they say in the story, I was wrong, it's 1,800 apparently, not 1,200. Didn't they say in the story the average cost for everything is $700?
Easily, it is. And it's even if you're not going like top of the line, right? So And listen, everybody, and we focus on the girls, obviously, but the guys are someone in this category as well. It's their big night, and they want to get new shoes or get shoes, and they want things to match, and they want them to be on the current trend of what fashion is. And even if you are shopping really aggressively and not worrying about where your dresses are being made, it can cost a lot to get to the prom. So Anton's Cleaners, who's been around forever, they actually started this years ago, this Belle of the Ball. And the students are nominated by their teachers, and so they get to go and they get to pick out, they have this event, and they get to go pick out a prom dress and some of the stuff that goes along with it. You know, it's the signaling of status and equity or inequity to me is always the thing that makes it the hardest for kids in school at every level. And not being able to go to a prom and feel like you look as good as you want to look, this really levels the playing field for them and for everyone that's involved in it. So it's something that I think we should salute. And as you said, this is a good news story. We should be trying to provide this sort of leveling the playing fields, equity sort of stuff on every single thing that they do.
You know, speaking of equity, one of the many things, I'm just going to say, one of the many things in schools that Marjorie and I fight about once a year, I'm anti-uniform, she's pro-uniform for the very reasons you mentioned in school. Where are you on this?
I am pro-uniform with a twist.
Was that missing?
Well, I don't like uniforms because I worry that they constrict creativity and expression. And I think it's important for kids to be able to express themselves through their clothing.
That's where I am.
However, and I also have another negative. However, when you watch kids in school signaling how much money they have, when my kid was in elementary school, the North Face jacket was a big deal. One of the parents actually couldn't afford a North Face, and the kid cried every time that they went home that she didn't have a North Face like everyone else, and I felt bad that I had bought a North Face. I had my liberal guilt. So there's that part of it. But then when you look at some of the kids who in my neighborhood is a school where they wear uniforms, and they dress them up.
Oh yeah, you decorate your shoelaces.
So, well, not just the shoelaces, but they buy more expensive polo shirts that match the color. So I mean, I guess that's just the human expression of I want to have what I want and I want to have it now. But it does worry me that we're always wealth signaling to each other or status signaling to each other what we have by what we're wearing.
So wait a second, so I'm clear. So you came down firmly on both sides of the argument.
Yes, that's me.
That is you.
You know how good I am.
I do.
My Ayanna Presley endorsement.
Exactly. One paper endorsed her, one paper didn't. That's an old story, but it is true. So if you were the superintendent or the headmaster at one of these schools, what do you do?
I would have uniforms, and I'd have one day without uniforms.
Oh, I like that.
That's actually a pretty clever idea.
There you go, Michelle Wood. Put that in your calendar. Put that in your color-coded calendar.
Girls were always decorating their saddle shoes.
Right, and you're always trying to wear things lower or unbutton things more, or whatever.
Shorter skirts.
Listen, the reality is they all wear a uniform. They just wear the uniform that their peers are wearing, right? It's like whatever the style is. You look at 5th grade, they're all dressed that way. So.
In a couple of minutes, we're going to talk to some bagel experts.
Really? Yes. I was smelling something.
I was just going to say, while the smell of coffee is maybe the greatest smell on earth, the smell of bagels or toasting is really
can we celebrate the bagel for a moment?
Go ahead.
Growing up,
we're going to celebrate it for 20 minutes.
The bagel was, remember, it used to be an ethnic food. It was an ethnic food that you couldn't find everywhere, right? Growing up on Shirley Ave in Revere, we had bagels, but not everyone had bagels because it was considered a Jewish food. And then suddenly it became the frozen bagel, and everyone loved bagels. And then wherever there was a college campus, there was a bagel shop.
Well, I have actually a good story, too. And Marjorie will like this because I've only told her about 300,000 times on air.
It's all right.
So when I lived in New York City for 15 years. Why don't you tell the whole story?
Well, I lived in New York for 90
I haven't
days.
even told the story yet. So one of my favorite things, one of the many places I lived was an illegal rent control apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which is right near Zabar's, which is, if you don't know, Zabar's is a famous, totally overpriced deli, which the most famous food was its lobster salad. And what was the front page story in the New York Times about 20 years ago?
Fake lobster.
No lobster in the lobster salad. That's a whole other story. The most fun thing is about 10:30 on Sunday night. You get in line at 73rd and Broadway. you first go to the bagel joint, which I think was either S&S or S&H or H&S or whatever it is. You get fresh bagels. They just made them. You then stand further in line, and before you get into Zabar's, Marjorie's discussed it already. Before you get to Zabar's, you pick up the Sunday edition, the hard copy of the New York Times. You do that too for like $11. And then you go to Zabar's and you spend like $80 a pound and you get lox and you put it on the bagels from the fresh bread. Now, is that a good story? Is that a good story?
You felt like an adult.
What do you think?
Those were the days.
Those were the days.
Yes, the newspaper.
All been downhill since then.
It has been downhill since then, actually. Do you have any stories you want to share with us?
Well, I lived in New York for 90 days.
You did?
Yes,
I didn't know that. What happened?
Well, I had to wait in line to get in the nightclub, and I said, I'm not staying here. I'm
Is that
going
really
back
true?
to Boston. It's true,
That's
pretty
not
much.
true.
Yeah, I moved to New York. After I left Kiss 108, I moved to New York from October to like the end of January.
Very sad story.
I was working for Atlantic Records. I have some very funny stories from those 90 days, but at one point I was going to a nightclub and my boss was in line ahead of me waiting to get in. Now, I want to note, I never paid for a drink or waited in line when I was in Boston when I worked for Kiss 108.
There you
Let me
go.
just say that. And I said, this is going to be a long road for me to get that free drink. I'm going back to Boston. So I did.
That's actually a little bit better than my story.
Those are the way you make career decisions when you're 25, right?
We just got a very sad email from a woman who apparently was on her swim team in high school back in the 70s. You know what she said? It's so bad then.
No bathing suits.
They passed them down from year to year.
Oh, that is disgusting. That is totally disgusting.
We didn't have any showers in my gym. How would you like that? The showers never worked for the whole time.
Marjorie still has a little post-traumatic stress.
I do. It's terrible.
Okay, we're done telling stories from 80 years ago. We're finished.
Condemned.
Sue O'Connell, it's nice to see you.
Years ago. Mine are just 40 years ago.
With local woman and media maven Sue O'Connell, co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News, co-host of NBC 10 Boston's At Issue, which you can see every Sunday.
You have two cell phones?
I'm very important.
Wait a second, excuse me.
So
Why do you have two cell phones?
If the FBI comes, I give them this one.
All right, Sue
That's a
O'Connell,
good
thank
answer.
you very much.
You. Goodbye.
Up next, the smell of these bagels.
Pretty
I'm
good.
like famished
Pretty
here.
good.
Is Boston the next New York when it comes to bagels? Or New York when it comes to bagels. Folks from two local bagel businesses join us to talk about Boston's big bagel boom. They're next.
Big bagel boom.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Behind every headline,
thousands of people on probation and parole in Massachusetts may be seeing dramatic changes in how they're treated by the state.
is a human story.
Keeping people in the community is the goal.
There are a lot of folks that if we can get them housing, health, employment, mental health, substance use disorder treatment, they'll be okay.
I don't think the system is designed to help. It's designed to watch you, catch you up, and send you back.
GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion, with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And Eastern Bank, committed to helping people and businesses prosper by investing over $240 million in local charities since 1994. Eastern Bank. Join us for good. EasternBank.com. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back here tomorrow. Friday, we are here. The general manager of the T, Philip Eng, will spend an hour with us from 11 to 12, answering your questions and ours. We are not here next Tuesday. It's a post-marathon thing. Next Wednesday, we're back. And the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will spend an hour with us answering your questions and ours from 1 to 2. Joining us now are three local small batch bagel entrepreneurs. I think is a fair way to describe them. Jordan Renouf is here from Brick Street Bagels in the South End. His bagels sell out apparently in a matter of seconds online. You can find him on Instagram at brick.street.bagels. Jordan, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you. Ed Thill and Lindsey Gaudet, they're a couple. Is that okay to say? Sure, why not? Behind Goldilox Bagels in Medford. It's open 3 days a week, Friday to Sunday, because according to them, quote, weekends are for bagels. You go to GoldiloxBagels.com. It's great to meet all three of you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I've bitten into both bagels already.
Oh, I haven't. Go ahead.
Yes, they're both absolutely fantastic. The smell of them cooking over there has been driving me crazy. But let's start with you, Jordan. How'd you get into this business?
I was working a full-time job for a nonprofit. I've worked in politics for the past 7 years.
Bernie Sanders, right?
Bernie Sanders,
yeah.
And I found myself with a little bit more time than I was accustomed to during the day, and I don't like twiddling my thumbs. And so everyone in the neighborhood I live in the South End, which is a big part of my operation, they always talk about not having a lot of bagels in the area. So I just started making them. It felt like something I could do.
Do you have any idea what you were doing?
No. I just started. I always kind of envisioned this as being a thing where I was like making them in my apartment and like delivering half dozens to my neighbors and just meeting people.
What's so special about your bagels? I mean, what I said is true from what I've read. They literally, you post the thing on Instagram and they're gone like in a second or two. Why they're so special?
I think we put a lot of care into our bagels. Every single one is hand rolled, so we touch every single bagel.
What does that mean, hand rolled?
It just means you take a piece of dough, you roll it up.
And then you connect the damn thing.
Yeah.
But rolling, doing things in our, I shouldn't say we, he started making them.
You're the business person.
Yes, if I made the bagels, no shop. So,
okay.
Started doing that 2017.
2016,
and then found a place in 2018, moved into it in 2019. Opened with tables and everything for 6 months, and then 2020 hit, and we switched to online ordering and mostly pickup for a while, and now we have sort of a hybrid of you can order in person or order online. And
great eye makeup, by the way, which is not the topic. So wait, did you know anything about what you were doing, or are you like your buddy over here?
I was pretty clueless as far as bagels go.
What were you not clueless about at that time?
Savory cooking.
Oh, you were? So you're like a cook kind of thing.
Yeah. I went to Cambridge Culinary.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Yeah. Worked in some kitchens locally.
And what about the bagel? Did I read that you guys said there was a bagel desert or something in Medford?
Bagel
was
desert,
that the thing?
Yeah.
Food desert.
Food desert, okay.
Oh, poor Medford.
We love Medford. We live in Medford. We've been there like 15 years, but it was definitely like, we have like 4 or 5 spots that we love, but then there was a need for some other places, and this is 4 blocks from our house, and now we have a great breakfast place to go to that we...
So why'd you pick the bagel there, Ed?
Well, Lindsey was really on me to make a good bagel, so...
I love them.
Yeah, okay. What is so great about King Arthur flour, please? I mean, I noticed that you both use King Arthur flour, so that's... What's so great about it, Jordan?
I couldn't tell you. It's not the cheapest flour. So I think that in my mind lends itself to it being of a higher quality.
Yeah.
From Vermont, they produce a lot of their stuff in Vermont. So.
Oh well, Vermont. Anything from Vermont, of course, is higher
Yeah,
quality. You all know. But what do you think about King Arthur? I mean, should I forget about Pillsbury and go right for the King Arthur?
Well, what I think is good about King Arthur is that, first of all, they're employee-owned.
Yes.
Yes, I love that.
They don't bleach or bromate their flour, so
Whatever
there's
that
no
means.
additives, there's no chemicals going on.
What's bromate mean?
I don't know either.
It's just a chemical
It's bad.
process to mature the flour more quickly so that it's more usable.
Now, we didn't ask you why in the Medford world, why are your bagels extraordinary as compared to your... I mean, let's admit it first. The bagels down at Dunkin' Donuts are the worst bagels in the history of humankind. Can we all agree on that?
They have a space.
We're not. They have a what?
They have a space. There's a
for
place
them?
in life, but
yeah,
that's not,
nice
not
try.
for us.
Yeah.
Horrible, inedible.
Lived
it's
on
like
them in high
air
school.
inside a bagel. Okay, so what's special about Goldilox Bagels?
I mean, like Jordan here, we put a lot of love and care and good ingredients into our product.
Yes.
And, you know.
And it's a fun pickup, too. We have a really good staff. Lots of dogs visit us, and we have lots of bright colors and things, and it's a fun little weekend experience. We have lots of good regular customers. We're very lucky.
But, I wonder about, can you make a living doing this? I mean, you're doing it, you said Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? So there's no Thursday in there, for whatever reason that is. But, I mean, this is like it's not part-time. I'm sure you're doing it full-time, but...
Yeah. I certainly can make a living doing it.
That's good.
I think that one of the things that I've discovered with this model that I have going on right now is because like 90% of my bagels are pre-ordered, meaning that they're already purchased online. It means that with a really small staff size, I can move through a really large line with not a lot of people. So if there's 200 people line, normal business, that might take 5 to 10 people, employees to service. With us, we do it with 3 people because everyone's already paid, so it's a very quick process. So anyway, that contributes to me being able to keep my margins.
Okay, that's good.
Yes.
Should you warm up your bagels?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any bagel shops around here that have the luxury of being able to provide their customers bagels fresh out of the oven.
Fresh, yeah.
So I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with toasting a bagel.
Okay, toasting a bagel. Did you microwave a bagel? No.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God.
Don't microwave.
Can
Don't
you
refrigerate
cut
either.
that from the tape?
Sorry.
Let me tell you what my bill said, starting with you.
Hold on, why not?
What?
What is it, ruin the gluten or something?
Ruin the gluten.
So a microwave works on the principle of heating up water molecules. So you're basically dehydrating the bagel and turning it into rubber.
Okay, forget that then. Never do that.
And if you like rubbery bagels, it's good, though, is what he intended to say.
Go to Dunkies.
We're talking to the people from Brick Street Bagels and Goldilox Bagels. Brick Street Bagels in the South End and Goldilox out there in Medford. Okay, Ed, starting with you. I don't like anything on a bagel except cream cheese, lox, and essentially what I'm eating on your bagels, which are little onions and tomato, lox and cream cheese, and on yours was it chive cream? It was fabulous. So where are you? I mean, I consider myself a semi-purist in that regard. Now, I don't want to hurt your business, but the notion of putting tuna salad on a bagel is abhorrent to me. Go ahead.
I am in your camp.
You are?
I don't like
so
tuna
happy.
salad, egg salad, chicken salad.
He hates
Sorry.
mayonnaise.
Sorry, guys, the salad people out there.
No, but that's because of the mayonnaise, your wife said. I'm not talking about mayonnaise. I'm talking about just combining it. That's not what you're supposed to do with a bagel, is it?
I mean, you can do whatever you want, but
To each his own.
I'm not, personally, I'm not a fan of
How
that
about you,
method.
Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
Be honest here, can you please? Come on.
I would love to agree with you. I think if you like what you're eating, then eat it. But I personally do not go with any of those things either.
Okay, good.
Jordan,
I'm glad to hear that.
since you used to work for him, what's Bernie Sanders' relationship?
What's his
with
favorite bagel?
What's going on with him and bagels?
I wish I could tell you, and I hope that one day he'll come by the shop to have some bagels. But I served him a lot of green tea and almonds, but never bagels.
You did?
Really?
Yeah,
What'd you do for Bernie Sanders?
I worked on his campaigns from 2015 to 2021. So I did a bunch of different things, but most recently I was on the team that was traveling around the country doing his events. So I was on what's called an advanced team.
Now, do you do, I mean, from reading about you, it sounds like bagels are a vehicle to get to build community relationships. I don't mean to diminish the bagel, but that is how you see it. Is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a very small town in Vermont. I moved to New York City with my girlfriend because she got in a program there, and then we moved to Boston because she got in another program. So moving from a small town, I've been really like seeking community and neighborhood. It's what I come from. And in the city, it was really hard to find that.
But weren't you giving, you did the pop-up in the parks where people were coming to pick up their bagels?
Yeah.
Was this
That was the
down
whole-
off Sherman Avenue?
Yeah. That was the whole part about building these communities, like bringing my bagels to one central location and having people just walk with their strollers to pick up the bagels. And they were meeting people in line. They were seeing old friends. I always heard people saying, like, it was so nice to run into you here. So it felt like I was kind of creating a space for community, which sounds like Goldilox is really proud of.
Do you actually care about the community in Medford? You don't give a damn, just the bagels. What's your deal, Lindsey, with the community?
No, we definitely, that was like a very important part. We wanted something in our neighborhood that people could go to, and we do likewise. We see folks run into each other. We have people that like bring us gifts at Christmas. They know our dogs' names. Yeah, they shout at our dogs when we're walking them in the neighborhood. Yeah, lots of good community. Lots of folks that I didn't know 5 years ago that now I know my neighbors, which is nice.
Okay, so let's see how much you do know. I did research
Is it a
this
test?
morning to find out where and when the first bagel was created. Do either of you, I'm not including you because you're the business genius, we're talking to the chefs here. Do either of you know? When was the first bagel? You can consult with each other to answer this. When and where was the first bagel?
I have no idea.
Poland.
You're right. How the hell do you know that?
Boston Latin School class of 97.
Oh my God. King Jan Sobolewski in 1683.
That's right.
There you go.
Wow,
I have
that was
Wikipedia
impressive.
this before, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, next question, which you can answer. Why is there a hole on a bagel, Jordan?
I think personally it helps the baking process. It allows
That's right.
the heat to get.
What do you mean that's right? Like, you know?
I looked it up too.
No, I'm not asking you to look it up.
Yeah, it cooks more easily.
Boy, I'm
That
so
was
glad
the
I got
answer.
Is that
that
it?
one right.
That was
How
the
about
answer.
you? Do you agree with that?
I'm not going to disagree.
Meaning you have no idea?
Meaning I don't know that part of the process.
But they, you know, and okay, let's talk about a couple other things here if we can. I had never had a Montreal bagel till Christmas. And I thought the Montreal bagel, I thought the New York bagel was the best bagel I've ever had. Then I thought the Montreal bagel was the best bagel. It was like 4 months ago. So far, these are
They're really good.
up there.
Really
What,
good.
what are the different styles? I mean, what is a Montreal? I don't even know. What is a Montreal bagel as opposed to, Lindsey, you want to do this?
Denser and more wood fire.
It's a wood fire.
Yeah.
They put honey in the kettle, so when they're boiling the bagels, it's got kind of like a sweet flavor.
Really?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know they were boiled before they're baked.
We boil and bake.
Yeah. So why is that?
It creates
The
the
texture
crust.
and the crust.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
some
it's
people
really-
steam, but we don't steam.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about gluten-free bagels?
Oh, Jordan made a face. I love this guy already.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
No, I have a little gluten-free person in my life.
No,
and
you know, I know Jordan enough already. He's going to say, if you like gluten-free, I'm fine with that.
But
That's your
bagels-
choice. Is that what you're going to say, right?
I wasn't going to say that, but I do agree with that sentiment. But no, I'm
bagels
just
are
asked
really-
about gluten-free bagels constantly. I'm sure you guys are as well.
So we do have some. We have to outsource them because we can't with all the flour we have in our shop. It's a tiny shop,
Yeah.
so it's like real flour is going around and around. But we do get them from a little place in Canada. We ship them in. We keep them frozen. We have lots of good regular gluten-free customers.
But bagels are really like loaded with gluten.
It is
regular
full gluten.
ones.
Yeah, like
Full
if you're like
gluten.
celiac, do not eat at our bagel shop.
Yeah.
But if it's an intolerance or a preference or an allergy that's not terrible,
But they don't taste as good, do they?
They're
not the same.
they're serving
No.
the purpose, and everybody, the whole group can go then, which is what we like. We like everybody to be able to get something at our bagel shop.
Well, that's very nice.
So how is the bagel? I mentioned Montreal and I mentioned New York, which I think are the most famous bagels, or were anyway. In a moment of seriousness there, Jordan, what is the reputation of the bagel in Boston growing? There's that Bagelasaurus thing, which obviously has been huge for the last decade. There's you guys. Where's our standing in the bagel community?
Yeah, I mean, I had only had 2 bagels in Boston when I moved here. It was Goldilox when I went up to visit them, and Bagelasaurus. And Bagelasaurus, I think, runs such a cool operation. I love their bagels. But yeah, I mean, I think bagels are kind of having a moment in the sun. I don't know about your guys' experience because you've been doing it for longer than me. But since I began, there've been a couple Boston Globe articles about it.
Yeah. Lots of blogging.
New York City
Instagram.
has a bunch of viral shops that are popping up, so it's definitely having a moment.
And you took off on social media. I mean, how did that happen?
This is Jordan responding
Yes, Jordan,
here.
sorry.
I have as much pride in the brand that I built and like the videos that I create online as I do for the bagels that I create.
Yeah.
I fancy myself a very amateur kind of artist of some sorts. I like making videos and I like sharing them, and I kind of have a platform to do it now. So the way that Instagram's algorithm is right now is they really favor videos because they're trying to keep up with TikTok. And so that has just worked in my favor because I like making videos more than I like taking pictures.
Now, I have one more question for you, Jordan. Since you worked for Bernie Sanders for a long time, you think it's really true that Trump's going to win?
No,
Because he worked for Bernie Sanders for a long time.
He's a political guy.
Okay.
I'm wondering what he thinks. Is a young, are you Gen Z or what are you?
I'm 29, so whatever that
29,
makes
Okay,
me.
good.
You're out of the millennials, I
Yeah.
guess, at 29. So what do you think?
I feel worried for sure. I think it's
Yeah.
a flip of a coin who would win.
Oh, there
But
you go.
I do have a lot of the same feelings that I had in the build up to 2016.
Yeah.
Okay, can we get back to bagels, by the way? Mayor Wu is here. We talked to her about politics. If you want to weigh in on politics, you can too. But remember what Michael Jordan said, which I really found offensive.
What did he say?
Republicans buy sneakers too. Like, shut up. And I mean, really, it's ridiculous. How many different kinds of bagels do you make over there at Goldilox?
9 regular and 1 special.
How do you feel about that? I mean, I am a traditionalist also. I'm not into the, well, go ahead.
Yeah, so I do joke that the next bagel shop is just plain bagels and black coffee because any modifiers are like, woo, for online ordering and in person things get screwed up. But
I could
do
deal with
like,
that, by the way.
Yeah, right? You'd go there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I do like that we have a good variety. I like that we have an option for a special. And
What's an option for a special?
Like we just monthly have a special, or not really monthly, kind of quarterly.
Like what's
But
what's
the
a
special
quarter?
right now is honey whole wheat. So we have our like 9 regular
Ooh.
flavors, and then we switch one around every few months. So
How about you
we
there,
like
Jordan?
that.
I have about 6 flavors.
Anything like wild or no?
Nothing wild right now, but as we grow and I have more bandwidth and time, we will be expanding the menu.
Okay, I mean,
You're going to ask who invented the everything bagel, Jim?
no, do you know the answer to the question?
I got it right here.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you ask, Marjorie, rather than...
Anyone want to guess who invented the everything bagel?
That was Polish King Jan Sobolewski's
right?
daughter
It was not.
who
Right.
invented
Grace.
the whatever bagel.
It was
Grace,
invented by a
exactly.
15-year-old kid Dave Gusson, who worked in a bagel shop in Howard Beach in New York. He told the New Yorker he invented the everything bagel back in 1980. That's what he claims anyway.
I love that.
Yeah, he was sweeping seeds out of the oven and got the idea to combine them
I have heard
on
that.
a bagel.
That makes sense.
Yeah, does that make sense?
By the way, a lot of people don't. One of the reason people ask me why I'm antisocial out in the world, and I say, well, because I talk for a living, and you don't want to often do. So in the real world, are you a bagel eater, Ed? Tell the truth.
Almost every single day.
Is that really true?
Yeah.
How about you there?
Oh, yeah, like 2 or 3 like a day.
No, that's not true.
Most
No,
days,
is it really?
There's excellent fuel. You can do it for anything. You're tired, you're going for a run, you want to snack in the middle
How many
of the night.
calories in a typical bagel?
I don't know that answer.
4
400
to
probably.
500.
So what do you put on it?
So I'm a purist as well. I'm usually just cream cheese, or I do butter and cream cheese.
Ooh, I like that
So
too.
good, right?
I like
yeah,
that.
and a nice warm toasted bagel.
How about you? What do you do, Ed?
It's a lot.
It's a tough question here, Ed.
Usually garlic, cream cheese, avocado, tomato, hot sauce.
That's what you. I think that's one of the things they gave you. And are you really into the bagel as a food thing?
Well, they may have just convinced me, but no, I eat like one a week. I don't
One
eat
a
lot of
week?
bagels. Yeah, I know.
So why are you making bagels? Why don't you make something you like?
I like owning my own business. I like meeting people in the community.
I know you do. It's pretty obvious there. One a week
Yeah,
is
he's going
guidance.
to be running for office in a few years. Jordan
is?
Yeah, he's meeting people in the community, and he's inspired by Bernie Sanders, and that's what's going to happen here.
Can I tell you something? Your bagels are fabulous.
Yeah, they
I'm
are
not just saying
fabulous.
they're really delicious. And you know that the key thing to me, not that you asked to a bagel, is you got to have that crisp outside that when you pierce it, you go to the soft stuff. And man, is that doesn't get much better, does it? Exactly. Thank you, Lindsey, for dancing to that. It's a pleasure to meet all three of you. Good luck with your businesses. We hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks
so
for bringing
very,
stuff
very
to
much
us,
for
too. It's
coming
great.
in. Thank you for a delicious lunch. We have been speaking with Ed Thill and Lindsey Gaudet of Goldilox Bagels in Medford, and the bagels are delicious, but they're about as delicious as Jordan. They're in the same. They're just
Good
as
job
delicious.
there.
put it
Okay,
that
fine.
way,
That's good.
as
They're all
Jordan
good,
Renouf.
yeah.
So Brick Street Bagels in the South End. That's Brick Street Bagels in the South End and Goldilox Bagels in Medford. Thank you all for coming in. Instagram.com/Brick Street Bagels to get to the Brick Street Bagels. That's Instagram.com/Brick Street Bagels with a period between Brick and Street
We
and
call
bagels.
them dots, Marjorie.
Dots, whatever you want to call them. And GoldiloxBagels.com. No dots. GoldiloxBagels.com.
We got in
Thank
early.
you so much.
Or some people call it GoldiloxPeriod.com,
Yes, that's
depending
right.
on your
That's
point of view.
Okay.
That's our
Up
millennial
next.
name.
That's right. Thank you very, very much.
It's great to
Up
meet you
next,
all. Good luck, everybody.
We're going to
Thank you
talk
so much.
with a New Yorker staff
Fabulous.
writer, Adam Gopnik, who's written this incredibly frightening piece on the rise of Adolf Hitler in the 1930s, with some very frightening parallels to exactly what's going on today. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Why does the country of Indonesia so often fly under the radar? A new book argues that Southeast Asia's quiet giant doesn't get enough credit.
It's the third biggest democracy in the world and the first colony to proclaim its independence right after World War II.
I'm Ari Shapiro. How Indonesia's independence paved the way for the global decolonization movement on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Seasons 4, the outdoor living store on Mass Ave in Lexington, featuring over 100 styles of contemporary and traditional outdoor furniture, plus a wide selection of plants, statuary, and garden accessories. Seasons4.com. And Comcast Business, committed to keeping businesses up and running with Comcast Business Internet, with internet speeds up to 10 gigs available. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
I'm Boston Public Radio producer Aidan Connolly, and you're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She's Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back here tomorrow, which is Wednesday. And then Friday, the general manager of the MBTA, Thill was courageous enough to join us and take your questions. Next Tuesday, we're not here because of the Monday Marathon. Next Wednesday, we're here with Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General of Massachusetts. She will take your questions from 1 to 2. Joining us now on Zoom is best-selling author, essayist Adam Gopnik, staff writer at The New Yorker, in a recent totally terrifying piece about the rise of a certain politician. Gopnik writes in part, week by week, day by day, and sometimes hour by hour, how a country with a functional, if flawed, democratic machinery handed absolute power over to someone who could never claim a majority in an actual election and whom the entire conservative political class regarded as a chaotic clown with a violent following. That would, of course, be 1930s Germany and the rise of Adolf Hitler. That piece is a must-read by Adam Gopnik. Adam, we're big fans. It's great to see you again. Thanks so much for your time.
It's wonderful to be back, a favorite space of mine. Wish I was there in person.
Next time, we hope you are.
Right.
Great.
And thank you very much for joining us again, Adam. So as Jim said, I read your piece in The New Yorker, and I just about had a heart attack. So talk about what you were saying in terms of the parallels between then and now.
Sure. Well, one of the things you'll have noted, Marge, is that I didn't say, a lot of things I didn't say.
Never mentioned the word of Donald Trump.
Exactly. That was the whole, wasn't just a kind of stylistic gambit for the piece, but it was what I wanted to do, which was to get the reader, to spy any parallels for herself, not because I was arm twisting or insisting on them. But I won't be disingenuous. They were obvious to me as I wrote as they were to you. And what I really wanted to draw people's attention to is not that there are, strict one-to-one parallels between Hitler and Trump. That's not the case anybody wants to make. It's that there are recurrent patterns. Somebody once said history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. So there are recurrent patterns of how it is that radical, deranged demagogues seize power. And it's not because they necessarily light up the vast majority of their countrymen and women to share their crazy apocalyptic nationalist fantasies. It's that people treat them normally. The election in Germany in 1932 was a normal election in the sense that nobody was voting for a nihilistic overthrow of the German Republic. They were voting out of fear of their political enemies. They were voting for their short-term interests as they perceive them. And even more important, the people who put Hitler in power were not the fanatics, primarily. It was the decent, cautious, constitutional conservatives, military people, politicians who thought that they could find some advantage in promoting him, that they could control him. And anyway, they hated the other side so much that they figured it was better to gamble on controlling this guy who they knew was a nut and a clown rather than concede anything to making a coalition with the other side.
Adam, could you share a couple of examples of parallels that I'm guessing as you learned about them, you were well, maybe you weren't. I was pretty shocked by how close they are to 90 years later here in the United States. Pick a couple of examples and walk us through them, if you would, please.
The occasion of this piece was a new book by a historian, Timothy Ryback, about this moment, and I was drawing very much on some of Ryback's conclusions, but also on a much broader range of reading. I've been writing about this subject for a very long time. Two things stand out. One is the way that there was a media mogul named Hugenberger who was owned most of the news service, a right-wing news service that he had started because he thought that the conventional German media was tilted too far left, and he wanted to bring it round. And he had this whole idea of having a kind of cultural war where you would bombard people with invented news and misinformation simply in order to terrify them. And what's fascinating, I don't think I have to underline the analogy there, is that he despised Hitler. He thought Hitler was terrible, but he thought he could exploit Hitler for his own political ends. On the other side, here's something else that I was struck by. You ask yourself always, well, why was it that the decent centrist social democrats and what we would now call Christian Democrats didn't form a coalition to strongly oppose Hitler's ascent? And one reason, explained by a political scientist named Edinger, is that the centrist social democrats, the equivalent of our Democrats or liberals, were so committed to the constitutional order that they thought if they did anything to step outside it, that they would be violating their own beliefs. They were institutionalists, they were proceduralists, and they believed if they simply stuck to the rule of law, then the rule of law would somehow magically entrap a lawless leader. I don't think I have to point out how many parallels there are to a particular kind of blindness that, I'll say it, the Merrick Garlands of this world have in believing that if you simply have normal legality, if you have normal institutionalism, that will somehow stop a demagogue from claiming absolute power.
We're talking to Adam Gopnik from The New Yorker, who wrote a piece that is a must-read, as I say, The Forgotten History of Hitler's Establishment Enablers.
I am guilty of this myself, because I have thought many times that the courts were going to step in, and now I see the possibility that the Supreme Court of the United States may do nothing to deal with this immunity case.
Or even if they do something,
before the election.
will it just be ignored by people who don't agree? But go ahead.
And when you also talk about the decent people on the right, that they thought that Hitler was too deranged to last. And
exactly.
You've heard that word describing the former president, deranged, over and over again, and that they could somehow manipulate him, but it was just the reverse.
That's exactly what happened in Germany. And yes, indeed, that's a familiar pattern of the rise of authoritarian nationalists. All of the decent constitutional conservatives, including, probably worst of all, the business class, the billionaires, right? And this is something we've seen again and again, the Jamie Dimons of the world, who say, oh, he makes all that noise. And now we say mean tweets, and back then they said anti-Semitic overkill. He doesn't really mean those things about the Jews. He doesn't really mean those things about ending democracy. He'll protect our money, and we can control him. That's a recurrent pattern that is frightening. And of course, the people who pursue it usually end up the victims of it. One of the protagonists of Timothy Ryback's book is the Minister of Defense, a man named Schleicher, who was certain that with his intellect and his sophistication, he could control Hitler. And the terrible thing is that the moment when he finally became chancellor, Schleicher said, now we have him in a corner. Now we've got him where we want him. Of course, Hitler had him where he wanted him and had him killed in 1934.
Yeah.
Adam Gopnik, the other thing that really, speaking of the word normalized used a minute ago, you wrote about how the foreign press normalized them, and in particular, a New York Times writer. Can you tell us a little bit about this guy?
Yeah, there's a New York Times correspondent named Burchell, and he always, and you can have some mordant sport, as Ryback does with him, was always explaining to his readers, don't believe everything you're hearing about Hitler. The people behind him, the establishment, are really controlling him. The anti-Semitism is performative. It's not real. He does it to please the crowd. Don't take him literally, or don't take him seriously.
You can make a huge impact in supporting GBH News by donating your old car.
Okay, well, they like Gopnik so much, I figure they'd do a fundraising piece.
I'm glad to do it. Please give to WGBH.
I'm sorry, continue.
And I think that's another powerful pattern that we see again and again. And the very wealthy are so concerned about their money that even though they know better, they will construct rationales. But the New York Times, I'm afraid to say, is engaged in many of the same things today. That is constantly, it's not so much trying to normalize Trump, it's that they constantly feel that if you cannot have as your front page headline day after day, deranged demagogue tries to end democracy. Deranged demagogue tries to end democracy, even though that's the only story that matters, even though that's the only thing we should be paying attention to. So instead you have to say, deranged demagogue has a new team behind him, or deranged demagogue is shrewd on abortion. We can't tell the simple, repetitive truth out of fear of looking simple-minded or overly partisan.
You know, it's funny, by the way, Marjorie and I have taken to calling him Defendant Trump regularly to remind people that he stands trial for the first time starting next Monday. And we've gotten a lot of criticism from people who support our show about doing exactly what you say is the right way to move, and we agree with you.
Before we get back to some of these parallels, I mean, you've been a journalist all your life. I've been a journalist all my life. I mean, I've never seen anything like this, like most of us haven't in the United States of America. So you say to yourself, and after I read your essay and after I've read more about Thomas Ryback's book, I'm thinking to myself, are we doing something we shouldn't be by normalizing? Should we be? I mean, you used to have to always try to talk about what the sane Republicans said and what the sane Democrats said and be more like even-handed. But now, to me, I wonder whether being even-handed is really not doing what I should be doing as a journalist.
Look, all of our instincts and all of our professional training leads us to want to be properly double-sided. We want to. We don't want to be narrow ideological fanatics. And so we respond that way. Also, and this is a very powerful thing, I think, as well, is we want to lead normal lives. You know, I was just listening to your wonderful piece about bagels a moment ago, just before we started talking. And I want to be talking about bagels. You want to be talking about bagels. I want to be talking about Montreal bagels, but that's a whole other story. And so the urge to live our normal lives is overwhelming for people. And we want to diminish or deprecate the fears. We want to deprecate the terrors of politics, and we do as a consequence. And it's dangerous. You know, I said once that I don't think it's so much as Liz Cheney, an admirable person about whom I agree on absolutely nothing, except the only essential thing, which is the continuation of democracy. But I don't think that it's that we're sleepwalking into dictatorship so much as we're role-playing our way into dictatorship. The New York Times no more wants American democracy to end than you and I do, but it's their role to play, a constantly double-sided, both sides are doing it, role. And we role-play just as it's the role of the Department of Justice to be hyper-cautious and to wait and to work from the bottom up rather than to confront the problem, as I think they should have, on January 21st. There was no way you were going to escape an inevitable confrontation with
Can we stay on the media, though, for a second? I have to say, I think there has been improvement. I agree wholeheartedly that the mainstream media, I don't even know why I'm using that term, but you know what I mean, the Times, the Post, CNN, has not gone as far as it should. But when they started finally using the word lie for what is a lie, as opposed to whatever euphemism they were using in the past, there is a greater sensitivity about how this is to be covered than there was in 2016 or even 2020, Adam. Do you not agree?
I hope so. You know, we went through groundless, unsubstantiated, right?
Yeah.
In our reluctance to say the guy is a liar. I hope so. The problem is that I don't think we still have a sense of the scale of the problem, and I think we're still seeing, and the point I wanted to make, again, is not that there are precise parallels between any two historical situations, but we do see the same patterns repeating. And one of the patterns is we don't want to face the scale of a threat. And that's always the case, and we don't want to seem hysterical. But this is a time when a little hysteria is probably well warranted. And the other thing I'd want to add, because I think it's vital, is in a very real, if slightly paradoxical sense, this isn't about politics. We're talking politics, but it's not about politics. It's not about where you stand on gun control and incarceration or reproductive rights, important as those things are, and passionately as you and I may feel about them. We can have a whole range of possible opinions about those things. All that matters is the survival of democracy. And the scariest single quote, I think, in my piece is from Goebbels, the minister of propaganda, who said, the wonderful thing about democracy is that it hands the weapons of its own destruction to its enemies. Sounds like an apocryphal quote, but it's real. And that's the crisis. That's what we have to be concerned about. And maintaining those institutions is what matters. And then continuing the healthy democratic arguments between opposing viewpoints after.
You know, you said we should not just focus on politics. So let's focus on one more parallel that's not political. Sexual depravity, if we can, for a second. And you talk a little bit about the possible sexual relationship between Hitler and his niece, who later committed suicide. I naively, and I've been really naive many a time about Trump, assumed that the sexual abuse, even before the formal finding of sexual abuse in the E. Jean Carroll case, which, by the way, Adam, under Massachusetts law would be rape, not sexual abuse, that the credible stories of 24 women before the last election, and E. Jean Carroll, and Hollywood, whatever the hell it was called, Access Hollywood, those were the things that the good people, whatever that means, couldn't stand. Why was I so wrong?
Well, I think one of the wisest things ever written about authoritarians, demagogues, fascists, if we want to use that word, and I will, was by the great Italian writer Umberto Eco, who grew up under Mussolini. And he said, the thing you have to understand about that kind of charismatic cult is that it's meant to be contradictory. It's meant to be hypocritical. And the crazier the behavior of the charismatic leader is, the more inclined his followers are to believe in him. Because then it's all about the cult leader. In other words, it's not about something he does or something he says. It's simply his atmosphere. It's simply his afflatus. And as a consequence, you have decent evangelical Christians who are following a man who has been convicted, as you say quite rightly, of sexual assault. And you'd say, well, how can they possibly square that with themselves? And the answer is that they don't. It's like a tractor beam in a science fiction movie. Once you're drawn into it, you can't escape it. You've thrown yourself into this cult, and the nature of the cult is to be irrational. So when we ask, how can you rationally conciliate his behavior with your values? The answer is it's not a rational attraction. It's a purely irrational surrender of your mind to a charismatic cult leader.
We're talking to the New York staff writer Adam Gopnik, who's written this incredible piece about the parallels, even though he never mentions Trump's name, between the rise of Trump and Adolf Hitler. Two things I wanted to mention. Number one, I think you point out that Hitler never got as much of a popular support as Trump has now. What was he, 30-some% of the vote?
30,
yeah. But and Trump is winning in 6 of the 7 battleground states, and he's neck and neck with Biden in popular vote across the country. But the thing I wanted to mention too, there were other things I didn't know about. Hitler's use of his court cases to campaign, and the airplane stuff. Tell people about that.
Well, one of the things that was striking to me reading about him is that he used all of the contemporary technology, which the more conventional institutionalist politicians didn't touch. One of them was airplane travel. He flew around Germany on a plane, which he couldn't afford, by the way, and couldn't pay for. He was always in debt, truly. And used those things, just as he used the newsreel, just as he used the equivalent of a podcast. He made a phonograph record, which was a major means of oral communication in those days, in which he played down the crazy edge of his anti-Semitism and so on in order to try and make him sound, you should forgive the expression, more chancellor-like. And so he was on the cutting edge, just as Trump uses social media more successfully than conventional politicians have been able to do. So there's a funny kind of alchemy between the demagogic leader and the edge of technology in his time. And we've seen that now steadily for 8 years. And, it's the Elon Musk Trump combination.
And what about the court cases? Because this is the parallels between the campaigning with Hitler at the courtroom and Trump.
Yes, well, Hitler had actually been in prison.
That's right.
Before, and they had treated him very gently. They treated him very generously. He wrote Mein Kampf, his very telling book, very telling because you'd think it would be a book of ideology and of plans for a future Germany. It's not. It's just a litany of grievances and resentments. And he's running simply on a platform of grievances and resentments. Sound familiar?
Yes.
And in the same way, it's the same thing we were talking about a moment ago, Marge, that you think that, well, if you have all these court cases against you, in either case, right, you'd think that would evaporate or diminish the confidence that your following has in you. But it's just the opposite. You can sell that as a story of your persecution rather than as a story of your wrongdoing. And you sort of can't win. The other side can't win. As I say someplace in the piece, in any conflict between institutionalists, people who believe in the rule of law and the rational evaluation of cases, with fascists, the fascists always win.
So, Trump, was it Melania who said he had Mein Kampf on his nightstand or something in there?
I think it was 2 wives back.
2 wives back, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, the late Ivana, I guess, is the one that said that he had Mein Kampf. But I wonder where you think Trump, because in many ways they're brilliant strategies, but do you think he actually read that, or do you think Roy Cohn took him aside and said, do this, 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 this? And, I mean, where do you think this, because I'm not a fan of the former president, but it's a strategy that's working.
Well, working so far. I doubt very much that he actually read the book, though he may have dipped into it. The point I would make, and this is the overriding point of the essay I wrote, isn't that Trump learned from Hitler or that Trump recapitulates Hitler point by point. It's that in any democracy, there are hidden flaws, kinds of crevices, fault lines. We had an earthquake here not long ago. Fault lines that you don't see, that shrewd, even very stupid, but shrewd and deranged, sufficiently deranged demagogue can take advantage of, that we don't anticipate before they happen. And I think that's where the commonality is, in spotting that you can go so much farther than anybody thought you could go in the accusations you make, in the relentlessness and recklessness of your rhetoric. Nobody thought you could do that and get away with it. And then suddenly you're getting away with it, and it gives license and permission to followers to draw on their own deepest, unspoken and previously suppressed resentments and grievances.
So, Adam Gopnik, before you go, since you introduced a topic that is a little more fun than what we're talking about, the Montreal bagel, I wanted to ask you a question. When I was in college in Philadelphia, I used to drive often at midnight with my roommates. We'd drive to 43rd and Broadway. I was in college in Philly. Get a couple of hot dogs at Nathan's, eat them, and come back to Philly. As an adult, I occasionally drive to Montreal to go to Schwartz's Delicatessen to get the best smoked meat I've ever had in my life. How would you rate Schwartz's, Adam Gopnik?
Schwartz's is at the top of my list. I've been to many great restaurants, lived in France for a decade. I went to El Bulli. Schwartz's is the very top. When my son and I went up to see our beloved Montreal Canadiens play, and we went to Schwartz's afterwards, I put it on Twitter, the perfect evening. Schwartz's makes smoked meat that makes New York pastrami look weak, and makes even, you'll forgive my saying so, Boston corned beef look insufficiently spicy. Everyone, once in your life, you have to go to Schwartz's.
Adam Gopnik, I admire you even more at this particular moment than I did before. It's great to see you, Adam. Congratulations on a great piece. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's all work to keep it from coming true.
Indeed. Be well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A pleasure to be with you. And Adam Gopnik, if you haven't read his work, he's one of the most beautiful and brilliant writers you're going to come across these days. It's Adam Gopnik, G-O-P as in Paul, N-I-K. He's written a bunch of books, and he wrote this great piece that we just talked about in The New Yorker, which you might find very unsettling, or you should find very unsettling. Anyway, up next, CNN's John King is zooming in from the road. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
You can make a huge impact in supporting GBH News by donating your old car, truck, or other used vehicle to our vehicle donation program. Your support drives our station and allows us to keep you informed and engaged in what's happening in our community. So, as you start your spring cleaning, let us help you declutter by taking your unwanted vehicle off your hands. Learn more about our vehicle donation program at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And McLean Middleton, a regional law firm with over 100 attorneys and locations in Woburn and Boston. serving clients for over 100 years in the areas of corporate law, tax law, litigation, and estate planning. McLean.com. And The Huntington, announcing an adventurous and bold 2024-2025 season. Powerful stories by inspiring writers, including Tom Stoppard. You can read about it at huntingtontheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browder. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Back here tomorrow, Friday, we're joined for an hour by the general manager of the T, Philip Eng. Next Tuesday, we're not here because it's a follow-up marathon thing. And next Wednesday, we're here with the Attorney General for an hour. We're joined now on Zoom by CNN Chief National Correspondent John King, host of All Over the Map and The Battleground, reporting projects tracking the 2024 campaign through the eyes and experiences of real voters who will pick the next president. Hello, John King.
Hello from Atlanta, Georgia. Here doing some voters in the city and also out in the suburbs. Been here for a couple of days. Got another day in me. And happy opening day.
Happy opening day to you, too.
That's right. It's reasonably nice for opening day.
It's beautiful.
Today, right? Absolutely.
By the way, you threw out the first pitch once. Didn't you tell us that?
Long time ago at it's the only game. It was in a Yankees series on the 100th year anniversary of Fenway Park. That year was a great year, and it was the only game in that series they won. So I am good luck, Jim.
Were you terrified?
Yes. My older son told me if I bounced it, he'd never talk to me again.
How'd you do? Did you make it across the plate?
I didn't bounce it. It was a little high and outside, but, I didn't bounce it, Marjorie. That's all that counts.
Yeah.
That's all that counts.
Remember poor Barack Obama?
I do indeed.
Oh, my God. That was awful. George Bush did the great pitch remember right after
9/11
in New York City? Was it the Mets
the World
versus
Series,
the Yankees?
yeah.
I don't remember who was playing. Was it the Mets?
Yankees and the Mets, wasn't it? I think so,
Mets.
yeah.
Okay.
The fact that you can't imagine a president doing that in today's times tells you everything that's wrong with American politics.
Right, they don't go to open that. Let's stay on that for a second. I read a piece the other day, and it's not last two presidents. Is it just the last two do not do opening day at the Nationals anymore? Right.
Right. It's just a shame. How long can we go about the polarization, right? I'll tell you in my travels, when you talk to voters who disagree about just about everything, they're also willing to get into a room and talk it out. It's the politicians who have created and then exacerbated and now are just, keep feeding the polarization. That's my view. But it's a shame. But basically, our sports are supposed to be our celebrations. And, a little bit of booing is fun. The First Amendment is great. But now it's just not, neither president, the staffs just think it's not worth it.
Wow.
I'm with you,
I thought
John.
it was going to be a security thing, but you're saying it's a booing thing. That's what it is?
I think it's mostly that you just, welcome to the age of social media. I'm sure there are some security concerns as well. But again, I covered the White House for 10 years, and Secret Services has its problems from time to time. But as an agency to protect the president, they're pretty good at it when they need to be.
Okay, John King. So former President Trump basically said that states should be making the decision about abortion. This is obviously it's a very controversial issue in the next election. He didn't really rule out one of these federal bans of abortion at 15 weeks or 16 weeks he talked about before. He didn't address whether he would sign legislation to ban abortion legally, but he's taking grief from both sides on this, leave it with the states. So how does this impact the election?
It's a great question, Marjorie. Look, it's clear that the former president, is paying attention. He sees how bad this has been for the Republican Party, for Republican candidates since the Dobbs decision, since Dobbs replaced Roe. And so he's trying to say, leave it up to the states. I won't sign a federal ban. So he's trying to sort of take a target off his back, if you will. But he also said in that same video statement that he was proud to be the president who made the reversal of Roe v. Wade possible through his Supreme Court picks. And that's where the Democrats will focus. That we would not be here in this new age of uncertainty when it comes to abortion rights and reproductive freedoms. We would not be here if not for those three Trump appointees to the Supreme Court. So most smart people think that, he tried to, I don't know that you'd use the word middle ground, but he tried to move away from the most dangerous ground, any support for a federal ban. We'll see how it plays out. I'm here in Atlanta. This is one of the big issues you face in the suburbs, right? You go into the suburbs that used to vote Republican that now increasingly are voting Democratic. This is one of the very big issues that is raised. So we'll see how it plays over time. It's the biggest thing to me was it's clear how aware he is of how bad this issue has become for Republicans. And guess what? He's right. He says he's proud. I would say he's responsible for where we live because of the decisions made by those 3 Trump appointees.
You know what's I was going to say amazing. It's not amazing at all, with the exception of Mike Pence, who says this was an abandonment of principle by Donald Trump, basically suggesting he should have been for an outright ban, federally, whatever, and Lindsey Graham, who he then excoriated, even though Lindsey Graham has gone to him on bended knee over virtually everything. Trump pretty much admitted in his response to Graham, this is the right way to go politically or we're going to get screwed in November. Didn't even argue the principle. And then, with the exception of Graham and Pence, and maybe I'm missing somebody, virtually every Republican who has spoken, who used to be for an outright ban 2 days ago, has flipped because Donald Trump said this is what our position is. Does that amaze you? Or I guess that nothing. Does anything amaze you like that in 2024, John King?
No, in the sense that you can get really dizzy, Jim, and maybe to the point of not being able to recover from your dizziness or your whiplash if you're trying to find intellectual consistency in today's Republican Party. The idea, not agreeing or disagreeing, but the idea Republicans put forward, conservatives put forward in pushing to overturn Roe, was that you can't find this specifically in the Constitution. Where is that right to privacy that the courts found in Roe? Therefore, it should be returned to the states. That was their argument. Then they won. And it was returned to the states. You know, now we need the federal government should be involved. And so, look, it's a debate within the party. It's a debate within the anti-abortion community. But it's not. The Republicans are just not intellectually consistent on this. If you remember back in the primaries when the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, was running, that was the position he took, that this should be a states issue. You should run on states' rights. That is on many issues, that is a defensible, worthy of debate conservative position, that when the Republic was founded, Washington does a few things, it's supposed to do them well, and everything else is supposed to be left to the states. But this issue has become, it's a quicksand issue for Republicans, much like immigration to some degrees has become quicksand for Democrats.
I did not realize until today when I was reading about this announcement from the president that Carrie Lake from Arizona that ran for, she's running for governor out there, I guess. Yeah, governor. That she had previously called abortion executions.
Yeah, she did.
During
that was 2 days ago.
Run, but now she's changed her mind completely. I guess they're not executions anymore. So.
And you see in campaigns, sometimes that makes it even worse in the sense that this is such it's an issue of deep moral complexity. For some people, it's an issue of deep faith complexity, faith values. So those who have a position and stick to it, even if it's a position that's not popular, sometimes can win elections because people think that's authentic. That's what he or she believes. I understand the explanation. I disagree with you, but I understand where you're coming from. If you keep changing your mind on something that's such an important moral, spiritual issue, you can look like you're reading the polls.
Yeah.
And all these things, I hate to tell them that we live in the digital age. It's all on tape. It's all been recorded. It's all been videoed. And if you're in a campaign and you're changing your mind, you're going to be reminded of your previous position over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I can't resist pointing out that they've all had to change their mind because the previous position for a lot of Republicans was life begins at conception, and now they've all rushed to support IVF, which is already a conceived embryo in the petri dish there. So life begins at conception is out the window, I guess.
You mean because of the ones that are tossed away, the ones that are not used? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they're conceived little embryos. So they're not. That's out the window, too.
So, John, you're in Georgia. Margie and I were talking earlier about the Wall Street Journal poll the other day that showed 6 of 7 critical states, swing states, with the exception of Wisconsin, 6 of 7 are now Trump states, at least as of the moment. If I remember correctly, I know how it was incredibly, it was 11,000 votes. Remember, I just need 11,000 votes, maybe a quarter of a percentage point. What's your sense of, other than the pure numbers, what's your sense of how Georgians are feeling, particularly those who voted for Biden last time and who are not so sure they're going to do it this round?
Yeah, the Journal Battleground State polling was very important in that it did show Trump ahead in most of the battleground states. Also very important that it showed his leads were quite tiny, inside the margin of error. So you would say that there's no clear leader but a Trump advantage, I guess would be the safest way to put it. And we have 7 months to go. I'm here to talk to voters, but when I come do these trips, I also talk, to smart political people who know the state very well for their advice on where to go and who to talk to and things like that. And most smart Democrats would not dispute that if the election were today here, they think it would be very, very close, and that more likely than not, Trump would narrowly win. But it's not today. There's a long way to go. You're starting to see things flex, and I do think number one, it looks like we're going to at least have the New York hush money trial, at least in the next week or so. Jury selection next week, it looks like, because of some court proceedings today. There's the case down here, obviously in Georgia, where this is a unique state when it comes to the Republican Party, in that you had the Secretary of State and the Republican governor, two Republicans, the Secretary of State and the governor, stand up to Trump and say, no, you were not cheated. No, you lost. We run our elections freely and fairly here in the state of Georgia. So not as many Republicans here are bought into the, Trump was cheated argument that you see, frustratingly, because it's not true, that you do see elsewhere. So I find that all of these battleground states are very complicated. I think Georgia all the more so, because you do have a debate among, there are more Republicans here who think, no, you lost. I voted for you and you lost. Maybe I'll vote for you again, but stop saying our state, rigged the system, because we didn't.
By the way, what I'm seeing on CNN, just as an aside about what we just talked about, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled a few minutes ago that a near total abortion ban from 1864, 200 years ago, is enforceable, 180 years ago out there in Arizona.
That's Carrie
So
Lake's
put that
state.
again. So put that issue front and center. Put that issue front and center in a battleground state. Democrats are trying to make Florida a battleground state again. Mark me down as skeptical, but we'll see. Right? Skeptical because of the last couple of elections in Florida, but be careful because of everything we've seen since Dobbs. In every single election where this has been an issue, whether it's ruby red Kansas or purple Michigan, it has helped the Democrats. And so when the Arizona Supreme Court says, let's go back to the Civil War days and our interpretation of the law, and there may be legal reason to do that. I say that flippantly. The lawyers might say, well, that's what it says, right? This is where we've been left. So let's see how the state responds. Now has a Democratic governor, but has a very important Senate race. You mentioned Carrie Lake, obviously a presidential battleground. And we just know from recent history that this issue, wherever it has been front and center, and now you have it hugely glowing light front and center in a big battleground state, it has helped the Democrats. And that's one thing the Biden White House is counting on, Jim and Marjorie, that, maybe people do have doubts about his stamina and is he too old? Maybe people are mad about inflation or mad about Israel, Hamas, but they're hoping that by the time you get to election day, that, this will become a bigger issue. So this is the battle in the campaign, really. What are the top 2 or 3 issues when we get to election day? Because if it's the economy and inflation, then the president's in trouble. If it's abortion rights, he's in better standing. This is the tug of war we're going to watch over the next several months.
One of the things about Florida, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, that because the abortion issue is on is a ballot question kind of there, that you can still be a Republican voting for whatever Republican you want to vote for, and then vote a pro-choice way on the ballot question. So it wouldn't necessarily transfer into help for the president there, or is the thinking different?
No, I think you have it right. It doesn't automatically transfer the other way. What the Democrats are hoping is it brings out some people who otherwise might not vote. Okay. Maybe younger voters, college-age voters who don't have a connection with Biden because he's 80-something and they're 20-something, or they're mad at him about something else, but they think they'll come out. So they were maybe going to stay home, and now I feel like I have to come out. And then I think again you can draw a direct line between what you just said and what Donald Trump tried to do yesterday. Again, will he be taken as genuine when he said before he would sign a federal ban, when he said how proud he is to put those justices on the Supreme Court? But he understands that if it's on the ballot in Florida and it's paramount in people's minds when they come out to vote. Do they also, vote against him? I think that's what he's trying to do. We'll see if he has any success.
You mentioned, I said to Marjorie before the show today, John King, we're 6 days away from a former president being tried for felonious behavior for which, if convicted, he could go to jail. And it's almost like, oh, by the way, he's on trial next week. This is not a criticism of you. It's a criticism of us. It's almost like an afterthought kind of thing, assuming that once the trial, well, I don't know if I'm assuming, if this story becomes a more center stage one, which it should, in my opinion, once this jury selection begins next Monday. What are you looking for to see if this actually matters to a handful of people on the margins of Trump supporters in terms of November there, John King?
I think two questions, any Trump supporters. The reality of a trial, as opposed to the possibility of a trial. He has said this is a witch hunt. This is Democratic New York. They're out to get me. This one's particularly unseemly. It's, do you want a president of the United States who, whether you think it's a crime or not, paid hush money to an adult film star to be quiet? No, thank you. Can we talk about something else? So the subject matter is unseemly. It's also potentially illegal. How they shell game the money around and all that. That's what the trial's about. Does it peel off any Trump supporters when they actually see it, right? If it happens, if it turns out to a conviction. A bigger question for me is, what about the people in the suburbs who maybe voted for George W. Bush, maybe voted for Donald Trump the first time, and then couldn't do it the second time because of who he is, because of how he conducts himself, who he is as a person, his tone, his toxic tone, and the issues we're going to have discussed at this hush money trial. Do they just say, I can't do it? Yeah, I'm mad at Biden about inflation. I think Biden could be better than this. I would like to vote for lower taxes, less regulation, Republican, but I can't vote for him. That's the bigger question in my mind. And then just what happens? I mean, there's a whole other question of, this is not a jail trial. This is a hush money thing. I don't think there's any prospect of jail time here. But if these trials continue, does it just shake anything into the Republicans? Especially, there's one small slice of Republicans who matter critically to Donald Trump's success, and that's Nikki Haley voters. Do they go home to Trump as Republicans? Do they stay home and not vote? Or what percentage of them say, I'm going to vote for Biden because I can't take Donald Trump? If you could put 100 or 200 Haley voters in a room between now and November and ask them every day how they're doing, that would be a good exercise.
Let me just say one last thing about this. Well, as you characterized it accurately, obviously this is a situation where he paid hush money to literally hope that it would cause Stormy Daniels not to say anything. The end of the sentence is, and not affect his chances of being elected to be president of the United States. So at least in my estimation, it's an election interference and possibly an election propeller for Donald Trump, his behavior, as much as it is a question about, as you say, the unseemly behavior of his relationship and alleged attempt to pay off Stormy Daniels. So I'm hoping that people see this not just in that narrow kind of focus, but in terms of why he did it to begin with, so that it wouldn't damage his effort to be elected president of the United States. John, the connection is bad. Before you go, how excited are you? It's not only opening day, but the Red Sox come home 7-3 from a trip to the West Coast. Are you beaming?
No, because they have a number of injuries, and I think you look at the roster, I think they're performing better than could have been expected up to this point, and I'm an eternal optimist. That's what happens when you're born in Dorchester in a family of 7 kids. But look, they have enormous issues, and let's hope they rally and surprise us. I'm surprised to this point. There's a lot of, they need a lot of thumbs to plug the holes they got right now.
We can't wait to see you reporting from Georgia. John King, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Have a great time down in Georgia.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, host of All Over the Map and the Battleground, a reporting project tracking the 2024 campaign, in which he talks to a lot of regular Jane and Joes about their hopes for 2024. Okay, up next. Can we have legalized weed better? It seems like nobody's happy with the state of the marijuana business today. I think we have some kind of anniversary now, isn't it?
It's 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years since.
It's not an anniversary, but 8 years. Yeah.
8 years, okay. Is it so expensive, the dispensary, that you return to your high school dealer? What happened to the people that were supposed to benefit from this? The small-time shop owners, particularly people of color, who seem to be not getting what they expected from this marijuana legalization. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH broadcasting live.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Anthony Rapp. The actor and singer went from barista to Broadway star by way of the mega hit musical Rent. Now he brings that experience to the stage in the one-man show Without You, which chronicles how personal losses converged with being part of Broadway history. From there, we talk to Matt Farley, the Danvers-based singer-songwriter who is famous for his superhuman productivity, averaging some 20 songs a day. That's on The Culture Show, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Dover Rug and Home. Rugs and carpeting for today's lifestyle with in-home rug trial and design consultation. Dover Rug in Natick, Boston, Burlington, and online at doverrug.com. Dover Rug. Rugs and the people who know them. And We Clean Heat Pumps, serving the region with cleaning and maintenance of ductless, mini-split heat pumps to help purify air and capture mold, dust, and debris as AC season is here. More at WeCleanHeatPumps.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie, and we're at the library and was streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Governor Healy has pardoned last week or the week before thousands, if not tens of thousands of people convicted in Massachusetts for simple possession of marijuana. A sweeping blanket pardon is something a reversal in policy for Healy herself. In 2016, when legalization was up for a vote, she had, as Attorney General, raised concerns, she did it with us and others, about drug trafficking and mental health for young people. She said last week that she's evolved, and she has, like a lot of people. Where we stand today in 2024, it seems the sky has not fallen because we made weed legal, despite what people like the governor were saying then. But are people content with the state of legalization? We're opening the lines, as Marjorie said, 8 years after legalization. I ask you, 877-301-8970. This discussion was prompted by a piece in The Atlantic this week proclaiming that everyone is unhappy with legal marijuana. A significant portion of the market is still underground. Research lags. We've discussed that with Art Kaplan. People who don't want weed are unhappy it's so widely available. People who do want it are unhappy it costs so much. So 877-301-8970. Do you go the legal route to get the goods? Or are you resorting back to a neighbor or some old, I don't know, hookup you had in college to avoid paying the high taxes and fees at dispensaries? 877-301-8970. Last time we discussed this, you were of the opinion, even though it had the exact same status as alcohol, that you would drink alcohol in front of your grown children, but would not smoke marijuana in front of them. Is that still the case?
Well, I think a lot of people feel funny about it, even though it's legal and it's very different. You know, if you have like, I mean, I live above a family with little kids. Not well. I guess they're late, like 9 and 14 or something now. I would feel funny having a bunch of people over smoking weed in my back porch.
How about a gummy? You do
that?
Well,
they wouldn't smell it.
Well, what if they knew you were doing? What if your guests knew you were doing it?
That's the same thing. I think a lot of people still feel weird about that. But you know what I'm most interested in, and maybe this is just me, but it's always interesting. We were just talking to Adam Gopnik about what may happen if Trump wins, which would be a disaster. And I think it would be a disaster, but maybe it wouldn't be. I mean, things we
maybe
think,
it wouldn't be?
Well, it probably would be. So that's probably a bad example. Scratch that.
Okay.
Okay, things that we thought were going to be disaster, like all these people legalizing marijuana. What's going to happen? Gay marriage. What's going to happen? You know, all these the sky is falling kind of things that we talk about, particularly our politicians.
Well, sky doesn't fall that often. I think it may. In this case, you just withdrew.
Yeah, well,
That's not an illegitimate concern.
It's not, but you're not smoking, 25 joints a day, like you would be cigarettes.
So what's your point with this?
My point is that we anticipate that catastrophe. If gay people get married, who knows what's going to happen? It's going to ruin the state of marriage. It's going to...
No, bestiality is next. That's what some of the opponents said.
All these crazy things. And the same thing with marijuana. Remember, we didn't even want to have medical marijuana. Remember Bill O'Reilly used to be on television. He was like the leading guy in America before he got in trouble for, loofah sponging interns, whatever the heck he did.
They were not interns, I don't believe, but go ahead.
He was, we can't even have medical marijuana. That's terrible, even though people were saying it was helping them with their diseases. So now it's legal 8 years later. How much has changed? I don't think very much.
So, but your point is what? Is that
my point is all these dramatic social changes that people fear are going to ruin
rarely
America.
do.
Yeah, the impact is usually very, very small. And I think it's much better that marijuana is legal than that it's not legal. I think it's unfortunate that people
it's probably a lot safer now that it's legal too, don't you think?
Yeah, there's probably less bad stuff in it. I mean, you go to a marijuana store. I've been to the marijuana store in Brookline. They explain everything to you, how much THC is in a gummy or all that kind of stuff. But I think it's too bad that people that were supposed to get helped people that had been incarcerated and suffered from the drug trade, really they have not really been very successful in opening businesses because it costs too much money and the regulations.
The equity thing, that they were talking
And you know
about.
what was interesting too? One of the places that has the marijuana business has worked, according to our research today, is in Oklahoma. You know why?
No.
Because they don't have all these huge regulations that we do in Massachusetts. Sometimes we are overregulated. I agree with the business community. Anyway, what do you think? Do you think are you disappointed with the legalization of weed because it costs too much? It isn't as good? Do you think it's better that it's out there? Do you feel funny about imbibing in marijuana?
And what's your other point? Do you feel like a fool if you voted no in 2016? I'm still not 100%.
Don't you remember?
I do remember.
Every single politician in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with the exception of
Joe Malone.
Well, Joe Malone is the guy that admitted. I remember I did
a piece in the
that
Herald,
story
I know.
a million years ago.
He was treasurer at the time.
Called them a bunch of politicians, and it was so funny. They all said the same thing. Well, maybe I was at a party and there was some marijuana there.
The
but
Bill
of course,
Clinton, I didn't inhale.
Or maybe I inhaled and I blew it back out because it was terrible, or I never smoked. Joe Malone was the only one that said, yeah, I went to Harvard and I smoked dope and it was great, or whatever he said.
Right, where is he
had
now?
A very good time. Well, he would have.
I was kidding.
Marijuana had nothing to do with his changes.
877-301-8970. We're talking about legalization of marijuana 8 years after the fact. Get your reflections on, and the governor has dramatically changed her position, I would argue, in a wonderful way for people who suffered as a result of those absurd laws. Kathy in Rhode Island, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Hey, Kathy.
Hey there, how you doing?
Good,
Fine,
thank you.
Good. I've been for legalizing marijuana for years and years, but I never really thought about all the bad stuff that went along with it.
Like what?
My next door neighbor grows legal marijuana, and my house reeks of pot.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. And then, in addition, you can't drive with alcohol in the car, which is open alcohol, so that's fine. But people smoke weed in the car. Obviously, they're high.
Well, that's not legal either, by the way.
It's not, but they never get stopped. I'm behind people in cars, and I can smell the pot coming out of their
Okay,
car.
so Kathy, your connection's bad. So if you had to do it all over again, would you be happier if a significant number of states had not legalized marijuana?
No, I want them to legalize marijuana, but I want them to include provisions for people to have to say, if they're growing weed in their house, they have to run filters so they're not bothering their neighbors. Yeah.
I understand that. Kathy, thank you very much for the call. I'm sorry, I'm only cutting you off because the connection is rotten. 877-301-8970. Smell seems to be a major concern
Yeah, a lot of the
people.
texters are complaining about the smell. I'm happy about the marijuana smoke I smell in cars when I'm in traffic. This caller was upset about the smell coming from next door. Seth from Salem says, the only thing that's changed in the last 8 years is that my local drug dealers are no longer making as much profit as they did. They should hang on, though, Seth. That's one of the themes of these stories, is that because the marijuana is so expensive in the dispensaries because they have to have so many regulations, that you're better off buying it from the person you used to buy from that's selling it illegally. And this is a great statistic from the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams.
What do you say?
Who talked about the fact that because marijuana is so expensive there, that there are about 200 marijuana licenses in the city of New York. There are more than 200 licenses in New York, but only 20 open dispensaries. Guess how many illegal dispensaries there are?
2,000.
1,500.
Well, there you go.
20 illegal, but 20 legal rather, and 1,500 illegal. So I guess it's really difficult to get the money to set these things up. But that's one of the big complaints, is the smell. Although somebody else points out that a lot of people now, they eat the gummies or they vape, which isn't quite as smelly as actually smoking.
I want to return for a second before we go back to the calls. The point you made a minute ago, I think a lot of people who were sort of on the fence, at least those people with whom we've spoken through the years, who voted yes, but were wary of the legalization, voted yes because of those same equity provisions that the people who had suffered, people of color in particular, as a result of the draconian marijuana laws, should be those to benefit. And that really hasn't happened, as you say, those equity programs. We used to talk to Chairman Hoffman, head of the commission, about how they were slower than expected or desired. The one area, though, that does benefit disproportionately, as it should, are these pardons that were done by the governor, because the statistics that we've read ad nauseum on the show that people of color who commit the same act as a white person under the former marijuana possession laws were 3 to 4 times as likely to be arrested for that behavior than a white person was. So these pardons obviously undo that, even though it shouldn't have been done to begin with.
Listen to this one. When our kids visit from Tennessee, they all go out, and it takes me weeks to get the stench of the marijuana out of the guest bedroom.
Kathy and Ashlyn, you're next on Boston Public Radio with Marjorie Egan and me, Jim Browdy. Hi.
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 Hey, I said, first of all, I really wasn't sure about the legalization, and I voted no. But I, was a healthcare provider, and I absolutely believe that it should be used for medicinal causes. However, I remember I used to smoke it when I was younger, and it used to make me, I said, I was a dope. I just didn't proceed, like intellectually or educationally as I should until I quit smoking dope. So I think that it can, some people, like myself, it really held me back. So I don't know, that was just a thought that I had, that I found I didn't grow as a person until I stopped.
Yeah, but Kathy, I would say to you what I would have said to you in 2016 is there's some other drug that is consumed by almost everybody that can hold people back too. And I think one of the reasons why the ballot question name was something like to treat marijuana the same legally or some such thing as alcohol. Alcohol has the exact same effect on many people that marijuana had. I would argue more people than marijuana had on you, no?
Amen.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, I don't drink either because of those things.
Well,
I just realized that for me, and just I'm speaking for myself.
Sure, of course.
Those things just didn't work for me. If I had one drink, I wanted a lot. If I didn't drink at all, I never cared about alcohol. But I definitely liked smoking dope. And I was a dope. That's all I have to say.
Before you go away, Kathy, one of the things that Art Kaplan says to us, our medical ethicist, quite regularly, is because marijuana is still classified as a Schedule I drug on the federal level, the same as heroin, by the way, the amount of medical research that should have been done with a newly legalized drug has not been able to be done. And as a result, there are concerns like the ones you raised, even for people who are pro-marijuana, that to make sure it's as safe as it can possibly be should be done. And my understanding is, Kathy, thanks for your call, didn't Art tell us that the scheduling change does not need congressional approval? It can be done by the president or by his Health and Human Services Secretary.
I don't know.
I don't know why he hasn't done it, because I
wish,
think he supports the change.
Yeah, I wish he would. I mean, I think there's a lot of research already, though, that it's not a good idea to be smoking pot or weed when you're like 13 years old, the young brain.
Well, it's not legal also for people who are 13 years old.
No, but smoking cigarettes and drinking aren't legal either. But it's easier to get it, I think now, and that those things are not very good for the developing brain.
So we're taking a bold stand and saying we don't think 13-year-olds should be smoking marijuana. I'm with you.
Yeah, they shouldn't. They should not be.
Okay.
And well,
but the caller says that adults should not be smoking marijuana if they're as susceptible as she is.
Yeah, well, she was. I mean, I think some people, drugs are not a good thing for them in general, whether it's liquor, whether it's alcohol.
They didn't hurt you.
Because they have a different.
Did they hurt you?
I forged ahead with all my drug taking.
They didn't. Did they hold you back in any way? You were an occasional user when you were younger, when it was illegal.
I do not think I lost my ambition. No,
You didn't?
I don't think so.
I think you did
but
pretty
lots
well
of people,
for yourself.
Lots of people do. Listen to this one. Best thing about legalizing marijuana is all the New Hampshire license plates that are in our marijuana dispensaries, given how they like to give us a lot of crap for going there to buy fireworks, cigarettes, and liquor. That's true. It's amazing. New Hampshire does not have any legalized marijuana yet, do they?
You know what? I didn't know that. I guess you're right. I think there's a bill that keeps going through the House. I'm not sure what the situation. You know what's also unbelievable about this? We've said this before, but the cowardice of the legislature. The first ballot question, correct me if I'm wrong, was on decriminalization. They wouldn't even do that. The people did it. The next ballot question was even more embarrassing. A doctor can prescribe an opioid, but they weren't willing to have a doctor prescribe marijuana.
That's right.
If it was good for you. The people had to do that. And finally, in 2016, the people how to do the legalization. But the most incredible part was the medicinal. We asked every elected official who came to our studio.
Gateway.
I don't know. You know who may have been the only elected official who supported all this stuff? Andrea Cabral.
That's right.
Who was then the elected sheriff of Suffolk County.
And she went into the pot business.
Well, I knew you were going to say that. Well, she did.
Good for her.
Good for her, exactly. But she was courageous enough to say what I think was obvious to voters, which is these laws are not what they should be.
Well, we have been hysterical about drugs, I mean, for years, and I think the hysteria has caused a lot of people a lot of unnecessary pain. And by the way, do you think the politicians would have, in the legislature up in Beacon Hill, would have legalized gay marriage? Margaret Marshall is the Justice of the Supreme Court in Massachusetts. She wrote the piece
and
to
changed the country.
And changed the country. But do you think the politicians would have done that?
Isn't there a magic?
No.
Isn't there a magic mushroom question on the ballot or something? Psilocybin or some such thing on the ballot here in Massachusetts. We'll find out in a second.
By the way,
share with you.
I remember being up at the State House before gay marriage was legalized, and there was that famous day when they were handing out those pornographic booklets, you know. And that's what
I remember very well.
That's what the
that guy was
politicians
a
were doing.
state senator from the Cape.
Yes, and it was South Shore, I would say.
Oh, sorry.
And they were very dog-eared.
I remember very well. I
documents.
do.
Yeah. I don't think the politicians up in Beacon Hill would have done the right thing at all.
By the way, my Comrex is down. So am I right about that? There is such a question on the ballot, which again will allow the voters to make a decision, and we will do debates on that as the summer becomes the fall.
Ellen and Hingham, thank you for calling.
Hello, Ellen.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Jim, I'm actually kind of glad that you brought up alcohol because statistically, alcohol causes way more problems than marijuana.
I think that's true.
It affects every single organ in your body, leads to domestic violence. I mean, the numbers can go, we can go from everything to car crashes to rape to, get everywhere. But that wasn't why I was calling. Myself and my contemporaries have teenage kids. And one of the things that we were happy about that it was legal, and I don't know how they're getting it. I would never obviously buy it for my child, but is there's so much fentanyl out there right now.
Yeah, that's a very good
point.
point.
And they put it in everything.
That's a very good point.
So you can't, it's not like, what we tell our kids is, you can't make a mistake these days. You can't just try something. And the idea that we would push them to, choose an alcoholic drink over anything sounds insane, but at least it's regulated. The pot now is regulated. That's my big thing, and it's like the lesser of two evils, but that fentanyl scares all of us.
Yeah.
Ellen, that's a wonderful point. That's a wonderful point.
Right.
Thank you for making that point. We really appreciate it.
It'd be a sad day if the parents had to go to the pot store to get the supply for the kids. It would be unfortunate.
You don't think that's done by some?
I think you might be if you're worried about the bad drugs and.
Didn't you allow your kids to drink some alcohol, wine, for example, when they were under the legal drinking age? I did.
Well, the problem with that was if your kids play sports in high school, it's like this big verboten thing that you're not supposed to be engaging in any way, shape, or form, which I think is ridiculous or over the top. But listen to this. This is from Chris. I can't believe how hard people are clutching their pearls over the smell of marijuana smoke. I had to put up with the disgusting smell of cigarette smoke my entire life. And, a lot of people had to put up with that, and that was much more toxic because it was much more frequent. And Mitch in New Bedford has a very important question. This is aimed at you, Jim.
What is it?
What I want to know is exactly what is the tipping etiquette at the pot store? Do you want to know? Do you have an answer for that, Jim?
I mean, I am somebody who believes that if you were provided service by somebody, you should give them something.
So if you were getting $25 worth of weed, you hand over $5.
Probably, yeah. I mean, by the way, you make me sound. Do you when you go to the pot store?
Well, I think I don't know if they take a tip.
So the answer is no.
At the pot store. I'm not
sure. Well,
sure.
they can
Maybe
refuse it. They can refuse it. And
maybe I'll try it next time.
Can we end by doing so? Because we're out of time, by the way. Do you know that?
Oh, we're out of time.
Good. I would like to say Ethan was kind enough to tell us, what day today is? National Library Workers Day. So we would like to do a shout out to the wonderful people that work in libraries here, for the Boston Public Libraries, school libraries, all the wonderful librarians who are world changers for our kids. So let's hear a little applause for them.
We would like that very much.
Happy National Library Workers Day.
Okay.
GBHnews.org about porta potties and the Boston Marathon. The piece is spectacular. Check it out.
Okay, absolutely. She absolutely has. We're going to talk about it here on the radio, too.
We are later this week.
Okay, stay tuned for the Culture Show with Jared Bowen right after us. I'm Marjorie Egan.
Jim Browdy.
Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you can tune in tomorrow and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
What's trending? What's